Welcome to Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories.
Hi everyone, it's Bayana, Robyn, and Porshèa embarking on a journey through the many fantasy stories written by and about Black people. Today we're reading chapters 46 through 48 of Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn.
But first, previously on Wizard Team, Bree wakes up after almost dying, learns that Cell not only saved her life, but is also almost dying. But he recovers more quickly than she does. And on her way to speak to him, Valak offers some advice and perspective about Cambions. Bree tries to thank Cell for saving her life, but then it turns into an argument because Bree can't face her feelings, and Cell is also stubborn. So they're both clashing for no reason, but it's fine. Back at the house, Valak offers to inspect her mysterious, like the source of her abilities, and then we find out that she's been blood marked by the hunter, who, if you remember, is the demon who hunts root crafters. And essentially he piggybacked on Vera's bargain with her ancestors. So while Vera was talking to her ancestors, the hunter was behind a tree, Birdman hand rubbing, just like waiting to add his little binding magic into it. Then Mariah takes them to Volition, which is a reclaimed plantation that is guarded by the ancestors who lived and died there. And that's where we left off.
So we literally start chapter 46 and it's like what part are we in now? 3? Volition.
Yeah, I think it's part 4.
Part 4?
I think so.
You are correct. Part 4, Volition. So they are walking into Volition. They've crossed the barrier. Alice can now see the ether, so she's looking around like, I don't know how to explain it, but you know, those like, wow. Just think about like the first few minutes after the little magic school bus like gets to wherever it's going, and all the kids are like, whoa, and Arthur is like, no. That's what Alice is doing in my mind. Mariah tells Bree that the barrier never comes down. It's like permanent. It just gets more or less visible. And since Bree is a new medium on the ground, it will probably stay lit up for hours. And then she also tells Cell, but you know, all of them as well, that you cannot use root ether magic. You can't use it without permission and volition. So especially I think for Cell and William, this is important because we don't know exactly what, but like we see a few times, especially in this chapter, where they're like, this is allowed, this is not allowed, in terms of like there will be consequences. Even if that consequence is just like, y'all got to get out. We don't really know, but as they continue to walk the grounds, Bree is getting really overwhelmed, and so she said she's seeing what is and what was. So she's seeing like what Volition looks like on the ground look like right now, but then she's also seeing the Guthrie plantation like through the years, and so she's kind of seeing, I'm not gonna say ghosts, they're not, but like the remnants, or like she's seeing like enslaved people walking through the different houses, or she's seeing like quarters that are no longer there. And Mariah tells her that she needs to get much better at closing up, because she'll get a ton of bleed throughs if she's not careful. Cell then asks if it's her power or theirs, and Mariah calls him a colonizer, which, you know, correct. Or
yeah,
she's like that colonizer thinking like it doesn't belong.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't belong to anyone.
Yeah.
I also think like
conduit.
Yeah, I noticed too the way that Cell reacts to Volition is a lot different than how he reacts to the lounge. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't necessarily like part of me was like, has he learned from his behavior in the lounge, or is it just like, is this different to him? You know what I mean? Um,
I feel like it's white guilt.
well, I not that it's
Like,
not
there's an
white guilt.
uncomfortable
I think that's part of it, but I think that there's like, and maybe it's because they're like on a plantation versus they're just like in this random spot in the woods, and like because it's very clearly like
Mhm.
magic, like like ancestral magic, as opposed to like these people are bargaining or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm curious, I guess, for him, and to an extent Will, but like, or I guess Will is going through a similar like journey of seeing the different ways that magic can and like has been used that's like outside of the order's purview. But um I think when Cell came into the lounge, he was very much like, this is unauthorized magic, and there's, you know what I mean, he was bringing his
Mhm.
like order lens, and it's not like he doesn't have it now, but he just seems to be approaching it with a different level of like respect than what he did before. And I think white guilt is
Yeah.
probably part of it, but it was something that was like interesting to me reading.
It also could just be, as like you're saying it too, is like there's a difference too between settings. Like if you go to a club and someone's playing jazz versus if you're in like a music, like in a like a hall, or like opera house or something like that, and someone's playing jazz, it just like puts a different kind of weight on it, or
Mhm.
it makes you kind of see like it's more of it's also like the idea of like things in con- things being contemporary versus like historical, and the kind of like meaning and weight we put on that stuff, like that just we take for granted the things that are like kind of more contemporary, every what seems to be like everyday or frivolous, versus like this is like enshrined and like history and all of this stuff. So it could also be that, like, to a certain extent of because you do get the sense, and we talked about this, like Volition is definitely a place of reclamation and um very like intention is very strong there, and like very like almost like hollowed halls type of thing. So I wonder if that also like plays into his acceptance of it, just like
Mhm.
everyone is treating this like a sacred space, and so it feels more like a sacred space, even though the magic is the same magic in theory no matter where you're at. um
Mhm.
so interesting to think about. um but then Bree asked about Valak, and uh if he's allowed um in Volition, like if he can like just come freely without like asking, and this in the way in which like Bree is allowed to come, um but has to like ask permission for Cell, Will, and Alice.
Mhm.
And Mariah's like, well, Valak was cast out by his mother's people, but ended up enslaved somewhere else. So he's welcome in Volition, but he doesn't come very often because it's not like a place of ancestors for him. It's like brings up firsthand experiences. Like he was an
Mhm.
enslaved person. And
Right.
so coming back
And
to
it's a
like
different, yeah. And
a
I think I kind of like that distinction too of just like, if you're have firsthand experience of like a trauma, maybe like some folks may want to reclaim that in whatever way makes sense for them, but in a way like some of that stuff is not like, some of that stuff is easier, or it like makes sense to like once you have distance from it, then
you're
there's
not
a
trying to go
way
back.
to look at, you know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, this is a generational trauma, but it's not an immediate trauma. And there's like a way that you can honor that when you're not literally in the like from that. Or when you know, I don't know if that makes sense if I'm articulating it correctly, but um yeah, it makes sense to me that he would be like, that's for y'all and like how you process what has happened to your like ancestors and whatever. But like, I literally went through that and there's no reason for me to come like to just be on this plantation.
Yeah. And I think there is something to what you're saying. Like, I think it made sense what you're trying to say, but I also wonder too about the idea of like moving forward and healing in the way in which you like, I guess, like intergenerational trauma and stuff. You're trying to understand the root cause of that trauma so that you can move on, right? But if you've already lived it, the root cause,
You
you know
know what it's
exactly where it
from.
stems from.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't need to go back into the particulars because you were there. So
Mhm.
and I think that's one of the like bigger things about especially the trauma of like enslavement, especially in the Americas. I'm sure other countries have their own distinct flavors of this too. It's like we just don't have you have to be very intentional about finding out those sources and
Mhm.
really understanding like the root of it. And like it might be a little bit easier now with like the internet and whatever, but like you also have to like make that decision, because
Mhm.
if you just go off of like what you're taught in the majority of schools and things, it just doesn't add up. And there's a lot of holes, and there are also a lot of we as the American system loves to pretend like it's not a continual trauma that
Mhm.
morphed as time went on, but it was like that was then, and then we had a war, and then it was eradicated, and then that's it. And it's like, no, you know. And I think it's very interesting that Valak, if you think about like everything, like he went not only the trauma of enslavement, but he went through the trauma of Reconstruction, and then he went through the trauma of Jim Crow, and then he went through the trauma.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So he's lived in all of these
Different
kind of,
iterations.
yeah, different iterations, but also like eras that, as a contemporary descendant, you're initially taught as like distinct start and end,
Mhm.
separate from each other kind of points.
Mhm.
Interesting.
I would say too, like, and I know that, he obviously interacts with root crafters and like and is in that community, but I could also see there being some not necessarily resentment, but like discomfort of like knowing that, there are certain factions that don't welcome him still. And so
Yeah, I
like
mean, I think it was really interesting that, like, she said, like, he was cast out by his mother's people,
mhm.
and that's not, like, the slave owners. That's, like, the enslaved people were like
And they cast him out as a baby, so
that's how
like
I read it, at least.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so there definitely is, like, I think more to that.
Mhm.
Um, but he can come, and, the Grand Dame, so they get to, like, the center of Volition, the main house, and like there's a barn, and it's all kind of, and the Grand Dame welcomes them, and then tells Bree, is it Grand Dame or is it Grand Dame? I think it's
The
Grand
Grand
Dame.
Dame.
It's the
Grand
Grand
Dame.
Dame.
I
And
The
if
Grand
you
Dame.
can't
watch
without
Potomac,
Housewives coming. Yeah, that's the problem.
that the problem is freaking Karen, because how
It's
Karen has really stamped the like Grand Dame and like in a way that you can't not connect it to her, and it's
you
like
can't think of
do
yeah.
I want to connect Karen to this? No, but can I
That's why
not?
I'm trying to like not say Grand Dame, because I feel
But
like
it
Grand
is. But
Dame is
that's what
Karen
it
Huger.
is. But it is.
But then you say Grand Dame, and that sounds stupid. Like, that's not what that is.
I love that we're
I'm glad
like,
we got that out in the open.
yeah,
I'm glad
no.
that we've all acknowledged that that's what's going on. Because,
Yeah. Shout out to Karen Huger, I guess.
right? So the Grand Dame, Lou, we're gonna call her Lou from now on. So there's no confusion. They're not in the Potomac. They're further south than that. Welcomes them and tells Bree that since they aren't the typical passengers, she came to handle some things herself. And then looks at Bree and is like, who you been talking to? Mariah explains that the power is just always inside of Bree. And then Bree's like, and I can't always control it. Because I'm thinking that Bree kind of looks a little bit like Cell after Cell got drunk on her power and she burned the cuffs, where she's just like completely overwhelmed by all of the magic and all of the spirits, and she's a medium, so they're just, you can kind of see it.
And it's
but we also see that.
Oh, I was gonna say her power. What's her name? Lou's power is
power
also stronger.
Yeah, I was getting there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, so Lou's powers, she's able to like read auras, and so I think everything is like Mariah says, like everything is kind of heightened in power, is like heightened and concentrated in volition, and so you really do need to exert some level of control so you're not overwhelmed, but that doesn't mean that like you're not going to pick up more, right? Obviously, just by the fact of where you are. So Lou's able to like look at her aura and immediately tell that not only is she Legendborn, but she's a sign of Arthur. And then it's like, oh, when were you going to mention that? And it's so funny because it's like, was she not that obviously her power is stronger at volition, but like was Lou not paying attention to? I don't know. I'm just like, I wonder what her aura is giving, that she can be very like specific in what Bree got going on, right? Because it feels like it's one thing to be like, oh, you're Legendborn, and I would say that the heightened power being at volition would be like, and you're the sign of Arthur. Like she was able to like, she looked at Will, looked back at Bree, and said, oh, I see what's going on here. So I'm like, did she not look at Bree when they first met and read, obviously not like those specifics, but like something, because she was very much like, were you just not gonna, you just weren't gonna tell nobody? And Bree's like, I'll give you the particulars later, but yeah, I didn't really feel like that was something that we wanted to say when we were at the lounge. Which,
and it makes sense because also like Lou was straight up
was
like,
already
judging
like,
her the last time they came out. You know what I mean? It's not like they trusted each other, and she was judging her family for
and like Valak had already like by the time they saw Lou, by the time they met Lou, Valak had already said 50 billion things about the Order and Sion and the King's Mage, like like where they stood was pretty
clear.
Yeah.
A note. Yeah, I think it's interesting too because it's like I like that we're seeing more ways that root works, not just the medium craft and not just what Dr. Hartwood and Mariah are able to do, but also like these different ways that craft works. And whenever they're having the conversation about like whenever Mariah explains that the power that like the Order is kind of like, whenever Cell's talking about like the oaths acting in a way like the root does, and like Mariah's pushing back and saying that it's like the power of the ancestors that actually powers the root that they're seeing. I have this question of like, does that mean that the power is like life force? Like whenever the Order uses it, it's like they're banking on the life force of like those to come or whatever with the abatement. Like that is like life force energy. And then whenever like they're talking about like rootcraft, they're using ancestral life. Like it's the ancestors letting them borrow some what they had in life in order to create power and energy. So is the magic system here like overall with the Order and with root like life force?
It's a good question. It's a great question, even. I don't know. I really, I think that that's a great way of kind of thinking about it, because one of the things, and this is my understanding of succubi and incubi from back when Sci-Fi Network actually had good television shows, the show Lost Girl, they talk about she's a succubus, and they talk about like that magic being, they call it chi, but it is like life force, and that's what they like. That's what she feeds on. Sexually charged for some reason, but that's, you know, that's where that
That's what the
comes from.
succubi does. Like,
Yeah,
that's what we,
you
that's what
know.
we do.
And so since it seems as though Merlin and all of them come from that line, if that holds, like if Tracy's kind of basing it in the same mythology or mythos, and like, yeah, it would be like life force, and like, you know, the force be with you.
And then my other thought is that Balak is like a very tragic story. Like when you're talking about like being cast out by your mom, because his mom died on deathbed. I mean, on childbirth bed. Then her folks push him out. Then he, instead of being able to do what he wanted with his life, then it's like, no, you're still gonna be enslaved somewhere else. And then he's cursed with, like, in the present day, even if he wants to be around his folks, like he has to build his own spot, because where his folks are naturally convening is a place of trauma for him. So it's like, it's just like, oh my gosh, like how, and then like on top of that, like, whereas like, you know, appearance, people would treat him like an elder, if he actually appeared as old as he like was able to get with his like human life, or whatever. He's like cursed to not even look like that, so he doesn't even get the, like, I guess it's like a blessing and a curse. The like natural inclination for people to treat him like an elder whenever they first meet him, like they're naturally inclined to like treat him lesser than which he's been treated like his whole entire life. So it's just like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy for him. And so it makes like him being like the way that he is, antagonistic whenever he can be, like, makes a lot more sense, because he's like, you know what, I've lived a life and I'm gonna be however I feel like being in any moment I feel like being gay, because F that.
It's also like really interesting, Valak's like story and things, because he's got like, this is like the part that resonated with me with this part, was like he's got such empathy for Cell, and like he's explaining, he explains to Bree a few times of like what it feels like to not be accepted, to live in these two worlds. But two things is that Cell grows up like surrounded by Merlins, and it's a fucked up belief system and viewpoint, but it's something to hold on to, and something like he understands in his own way, like who he is and stuff. And like, so how did Valak kind of learn and get such like possession of himself and his power and like what it means to be Cambion? Like, who taught him, right? Because he gets cast out because he's Cambion. He gets enslaved. Like, one, who's raising him? What does that early childhood look like for him? And then like, where does he go to? And this is where I have like a Erebus showed up, and that's why he don't mess with that man type of thing. But I don't know. But yeah, like, how did he, where did he get that self-possession from? And then on the other hand, there's a few times when he talks about like really caring for and really like connecting to his human side, and especially that the fact that they are like enslaved root crafters, like that specific community. Like, he's not, when we meet him, and we don't like, we just know from like the memory walk that Bree went on kind of what happened, but we don't know that he was cast out. We don't know like a lot about, or that he, you know, was enslaved elsewhere. And like, I think we do know that he was enslaved, or at least we know he lived through that time period, which is, whether you're free or not, was not a, you know, like if you're living in the South
we heard
in that
before
moment,
this chapter that he was cast out too. Like I think this is the first time we learned that he wasn't like, he didn't grow up with his family.
Yeah, this is the first time we learned that. But what I'm saying is like, so all of the times before then in which he is like feeling connected to the Rootcraft community and protective of it, it's like, how did he get that? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, or not, but there has to be a journey and a story there, right? Because like, you could very easily see from this, like him just being like, F it, and like not wanting to commune with them, not really feeling charitable to either side, or at least, or especially to like the Rootcrafter side that cast him out as a baby for something he did not control.
And it's possible where he was
clearly
sent had a community that was less like scary about that stuff.
But he clearly aligns with his mother's family at some point, because Lou is in his, like, him and Lou are in the same orbit, which would not have happened by like chance. Like he would have had to like been in touch with her family line further back.
Yeah. And he does mention, I think, with Bree, like there are different viewpoints and like ways of like people, or like philosophies around Rootcraft. So to me, it seems like he's kind of accepting at least a little bit that like what happened to him was because of those particular people, like his mother's people, and that particular viewpoint, versus like that is indicative of like the entire community, I guess.
Yeah.
But
there's also a question of why is it that he doesn't age?
Yeah.
Because all the other Cambions that we've seen, including Merlin, who is a balanced Cambion, they all like Merlin wasn't walking around looking like a teenager.
And he was, he was like more directly he was Merlin. So it's interesting though too, because it's like, was it that a deal? Was that like, is that related to his dealings? So what I think is happening here is that we're saying, hi Tracy, if you're gonna do like a 0.5 or like, you know,
no, I think
like we need a ballot.
She made this post on Threads that was kind of like, I don't know the song, but maybe one of y'all does. She was talking about dang, I just clicked out of it. She was talking about this song Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. She was like, gonna put it on the Oathbound soundtrack. And somebody was like, oh, it's so cell coded and it coded and Bree coded. And then she replied, and Valak coded. So
I don't want the world to see
me, because I don't think they will understand. When everything's meant to be broken, I just want you to know who I am. You know that song. You have to hear it, but you know it.
Yeah, probably. So anyway, I don't know. Like, we should get. I would love more Valak content, but part of me is sure that we're gonna get a lot of Valak and Oathbound, which I'm really excited about. And maybe some of these questions will be answered.
Yeah,
but also he could have his own separate little.
Also
like
both
that too. Okay, so let's keep going, because I always feel like my chapter I don't think is the biggest one. So
I think we just get warmed up in your chapters, and then the other ones we we be also bringing really up stuff from the other chapters in this chapter, so there's that too.
Yeah. So Lou tells Mariah to settle Alice, Cell, and Will in the guest house, and then she'll show Bree to her room, and Bree's like, I can stay in the guest house, and she's like, no, you can't, because if you're going to do ancestor work, you need to be in the ancestor's home, and that the others will also do work and make themselves useful. And she's like, you know, helping the kitchens clean up check the wards, whatever, find something to do. And I just love how Black that is. In general, like, this is not a vacation, and they'll talk a little bit later about feeling like safe and able to like kind of put their guard down, and how relaxing I guess that is. But it's not that they're not doing any work, and it's not like you're just going to come here and benefit from all of the work that the ancestors and the people and the root crafters community are doing, and you're just chilling. Like, it's not a resort.
Also, I think I like that it's like the group is immediately reluctant to be split apart, which is like the opposite of like a Scooby-Doo mystery. Everyone's just like, let's split up, and they're like,
Right.
no, you're
They're
doing
like,
so
"Oh, this is
far.
the worst."
They're doing like the
It's
Steely like claps with each other, like, no.
Well, and then they are like saying their goodbyes, and Lou and Mariah are like,
They're
y'all
like,
are dramatic.
yeah,
Like,
so
you're not.
Yeah.
It's not that you're just not sleeping in the same building.
That's
And
it.
it's like, and it's so funny because it's not like it's just like Cell being the dramatic one. It's always, it's like all of them are being like, oh.
All of them. William is
And it
like
makes sense,
caressing her
like-
cheek and giving her a kiss goodbye, and
they've
been
trauma
through a
bonded too
lot.
hard. They've
been
trauma
through so
bonded a
much,
little bit
and it's
too
super
hard.
funny,
Yeah.
especially because it's literally the next chapter they're together again, putting dinner together. Like, it's not like they literally are not separated.
They're
But
on
it does
this
make sense
same
because they've been
hour,
through so
property,
much.
you know.
They've like, even the
Mhm.
moment where they were separated, like Bree and Cell or whatever, they both came
Something
back
major
almost
happened.
dead. You know,
Mhm.
they both nearly died. So I think they're just like, yeah, they've been traumatized. These poor
Traumatized.
babies.
Yeah, they're traumatized. So this is also where they say goodbye. Stella and Bree have a little like extra moment where Stella apologizes for being mean, and Bree is like recognizing or realizing like, oh, I'm about to go to sleep secure in the knowledge that we are safe and protected. Like, I'm not going to be worried about Erebus being able to get in here. I'm not going to be worried about Kizia's or Jonas's who are going to like betray us, who are supposed to put our like faith in. Like, we can just rest. Wow. And like really rest. And
Ain't
then
that about
Cell
a Black
says,
place?
right?
Yes, and I kind of hate
Wouldn't you
Tracy for
wouldn't
that
that have to be
because
Black folk who create that kind of space? Because we're the only ones who, like, the way we've been run through everything. So for us to find peace means that the peace is real. Like, this is not no half-stepping peace. This is full on protection. There's no,
And it's like you can only really count on it because it's being provided by us.
but why? Because we know how desperately we need it.
Fun times.
Yeah. I also just
So
do want to
then-
say
Oh, go
real
ahead.
quick, Tracy's kind of mean for this because it's not like it lasts. Sorry to say.
Yeah.
Like, so it's also kind of like they're saying this, but I'm like, no.
But you know who disrupts the problem? But you know who disrupts it? The white man. And so
No,
we
100%. 100%.
So then Cell says, we aren't meant to run from trauma to trauma. No one can run forever. And I'm like, ain't that about the truth? But also, like, explain the plot of Legendborn and Bloodmarked in a sentence. It's running from trauma to trauma.
It's
So
not like
like,
every fantasy series, you
Yep.
know.
yeah, but this is like a condensed amount of trauma to trauma in 2 books that I know it's not.
We didn't
not
count
unheard
this
of,
this
but it's
time
like-
like how long it's been, because I'm like in Legendborn we were definitely counting like it's only been a week or whatever, and like we didn't do that for this, but it's really like the same situation.
It's only been like, but like with Legendborn and this, like we said earlier when
It's been, like-
when she was in the Institute and stuff, it's been like 3 months
Mm-hmm.
all together, because it had only been like Legendborn is like a week and a half, maybe a month, let's say.
It's not even a whole like semester. We've
Mm-mm.
not even
Yeah.
gotten to the
Yeah,
winter
it's
holiday
her-
yet.
Yeah, it's like November, I'm pretty sure, because it's like her birthday or whatever. It's
Yeah.
about to happen. So like, yeah, it's literally. If this all happens in the course of a semester, I'm like, give him
the
winter
whole
break
series.
off. Bro,
I would literally be like, it needs to end with the epilogue being like, and then Bree decided early college isn't for me. I'm gonna take a break.
I'm going back to high
I'm gonna
school.
take a gap year.
Mhm.
I'm gonna sleep. And yeah, it's too much. Whew. So then there is so then Cell goes with Alice and William to the guest house, and there's a second root barrier around the house, and Lou says the foundations of root is protection, and it's up to the ancestors to decide how much protection to offer and how much they need. And then she also said it's a non-negotiable that like your friends are not allowed in the house. It is only for the descendants of slavery. It is only for, and I wonder about this too, because it's like how far does that extend, right? So like if you're Jamaican or you're a descendant of like Caribbean or South American slavery, right? But I'm like, is it, you have to be, I don't know, I'm just wondering like how far that extends, right?
But if they were also, if you're a descendant of someone who's enslaved, then you're a descendant of someone who's enslaved.
Yeah, but is it, yeah, I just wondered if it's like the Americas, North America, you know, just like how far, because a lot of that stuff is also like almost impossible to parse from our side, but maybe not from the ancestor side. I don't know.
I feel like
I'd say
if
from
you
the
get there, that could be the
no.
litmus test. Like, can you come in the door? Because then we'll know. We'll know for sure.
It's true. Bree finds like that really comforting though, and like I think it's also like I feel like Lou sees what's going on between her and Cell and is like, that boy can't be sneaking in here at night. Like there's not going to be any hanky panky coming up through the window. You know what I mean? Like just don't even
try it.
If you want to see him, you go over there.
This is not the place for boo loving. We don't do that over here. Not well. You could.
Y'all can stare longingly into each other's eyes, but y'all want to do something about it.
If he was a descendant of someone who was enslaved, no problem. However, not over here.
Not over here. Take that shit to the guest house. But then Bree finds that to be kind of like beautiful and says like a place of their own to rest where they can decide what to preserve and how. And I just feel like it's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment.
The fact that it's the big house is what's getting to me, because like that I feel like it's very intentional. That like before, like when people were being enslaved, that was something that like the people who were their like human traffickers were saying who could be invited, who could have fun in there, what that fun would look like, how much that would harm the folks who were enslaved to do so, to make that fun available for those folks. So them reclaiming the big house and cleansing it ritually as many times as they did, and then being like, absolutely under no account will anyone who's ever been from a beneficiary of oppression, will they actually be able to come in here and disturb what we've laid to rest? Like, absolutely not. We will not be allowing that anymore, especially in this place, the place where it was a site of the oppressors doing the most.
Yeah.
And they called all the shots. Now we do.
Yeah.
It's like poetry.
Wizard Team is part of the Black Nerds Create Collective, which provides content through the lens of critical and creative fandom. In B&C's Discord, you can not only find a channel dedicated to all things Wizard Team, but spaces to connect with other fellow nerds about stories across media, genre, and more. Join a group read. find book recommendations, and maybe even get the juice to write your own story. Just go to bnc-community.com to join.
This episode is brought to you by Vuori. Give the active people in your life something they'll truly appreciate. Performance apparel from Vuori. Whether they're into running, surfing, hiking, or even just casual walks around the block, there's something for everyone. And if you're not sure what to gift them, you can't go wrong with something from Vuori's Dream Knit collection. It's the perfect gift and so comfortable. Get 20% off your first purchase today at Vuori, VUORI.com/Spotify.
On Wizard Team, not only do we do a close read of Black fantasy books, we also go on many tangents about other topics that are of interest to us. Monthly Magic, the Black Nerds Crate newsletter, is another way to find out about the topics that are of interest to not only the host of Wizard Team, but all the members of the Black Nerds Crate collective. Subscribe to Monthly Magic at blacknerdscrate.com to get a free dose of magic in your inbox each month.
Okay, and then we get to chapter 47. So Bree goes to her new room, which is kind of like a mix of, like, it's clearly been refurbished, but it's like a mix of like the, original interior and like a little more current. She immediately takes a nap. Like she just like she
Passes
looks
out.
around, she lays down, and she passes out. And it's necessary. I appreciate this. Like,
On
we
top
talked
of the covers. You know what
Yeah.
You know that level of
how
like
tired
just
you have to be.
in the-
It makes me think there was one time my birthday, like a few years ago, I went like we went like out, we like stayed at an Airbnb because it was during the pandemic, but we had gone for this like long walk, and then we came back to the house, and everybody just went to their respective rooms, and we all fell asleep, and none of us did it on purpose. Like, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna read whatever. I was done. Like, everybody was done for like a couple hours, and like they've obviously been through way more, but it's definitely like hilarious to me that she was like done out. And I appreciate it because we've
I'm
talked
just
about
gonna
it
sit
in the
here real
context
quick,
of,
gather myself.
yeah, just before I go do something else, and it's like, nope, done. I do appreciate for like like we talked about it already about like they need to rest. So like Tracy actually giving them like a place or in a space and like a time to actually like get a little rest before things start popping off for the last part of the book. And like finally, like she just gets a moment.
Yeah, my question is, when it comes to naps and intention, I and I recognize that I have a different relationship with sleep than some people probably do. But for me, I would say like 90% of my naps are unintentional naps. Is that not normal? Are most naps intentional?
I think
I mean, I don't really
there's a
take
difference
naps,
between
so.
like I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna lay here and rest my eyes, and then you fall asleep, or like I'm gonna take a nap and then the nap gets out of your control. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever like been like, I'm a quick 20 minutes and then like 4 hours later you're like, I might as well just gone to sleep. Damn. And then there is the like, I'm gonna wash my hands and I'm just gonna sit, and then all of a sudden you're out. Like, she wasn't even like, I think her thought was like, I'm gonna drop the little bit of clothing that I have and like check out this room, and then I'm gonna go back downstairs and see, get started. But it wasn't that. So.
Yeah. I don't usually take naps, but usually when I do, I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to go lay down. And but I also don't always expect to actually fall asleep. So
Yeah, I just be like, I'm a little tired. Maybe I'm gonna take a nap.
So yeah, so she wakes up and she finds Lucille on the back porch, or I don't know if it's on the back porch, on the porch. And she's sorting through this basket. She tells Bree that she'll need to state her intentions to her ancestors, and Bree's like, well, that's easy. My intention's to get stronger. And Lucille is like, maybe, which like offends Bree. Which is like, I get it, because like Lucille's a little bit I don't know. Her kind of like attitude, or at least her like delivery, is very much not a way that Bree can receive. You know what I mean? Like, obviously she respects the woman and like is happy that she's being helped by her, but like it's also just like this kind of like auntie attitude that she's just like, look, I like you don't have to dis like what's the word? Like dismiss my like what I think I want or what I, at this moment what I want. Like you could say it in a different way. But
I feel
yeah,
like
so
it's just like
she's
she's
like,
blunt. She's just like,
yeah,
maybe.
she's blunt and she's like she knows more about this magic and stuff than Bree does, obviously. But Bree doesn't like being told what to do either. Like she doesn't like she's like very she bristles when people speak to her in a specific kind of way. And I'm not even saying that like Lucille is like it's just how she is. But it's
I'm trying to
funny
think
to
of like a
like
way that I've seen Bree be talked to that she's enjoyed, and the only time I can think of it's like Nick, and it's like him like sweet talking her, and I'm like, does she only like sweet talk? Is that the only time she likes to be talked to?
I think it's
Will maybe?
yeah, well, I think when people like directly challenge her, I think that's when she has the issue. Cuz she feels like she has to fight back. Like she's immediately on defense, I think. And I don't know if that's how she is all the time or if that's just because of like everything that she's dealt with since you know since she walked up on the orders on the lodge or whatever. But she definitely is like she gets defensive and like combative really quickly.
That makes her sound like the Medea sound from TikTok, where it's like where the judges like asking Medea like, you're very vindictive, and she's like, I just got to get people whenever they got me, so I got to get them back. And then he's like, is that always? She's like, if they get me, I got to get like it's like if they get me, I'm like get them. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like, oh, you came for me, I'm gonna come right back for you. It's like, are we sure
Right.
that's what was happening? Okay, all right.
And she's like, but it's also funny to watch her like funny and relatable to watch her be annoyed but also remember that she's speaking to an elder and she can't just like say any old thing, you know what I mean? Like she's still like parsing her words and she's got a bit of a like tone to them, but she's also not saying nothing like wildly out of pocket in response. But if it was someone else, she might have been more, like if it was Cell saying some shit like that, she would have popped all the way off, so like it's just like kind of relatable to be like, yeah, okay, I didn't love the way that was said to me, but I gotta respect.
Would that she had the same energy in this book to Tor last book, because that would have been fun to see. Like,
but then I also
then
there's like that other side of it of like wanting to respond in a certain way and knowing you can't for like different reasons. Although she did kind of pop back at Tor at the beginning of this book,
not fully
but
though.
it was a different,
and it was like, yeah, and it's because like she knows she's Arthur now, like so yeah.
So Bree's offended, but then Lucille kind of like elaborates and tells her that intention isn't want and it's not need either. It's desire plus will, and which is volition. So bringing it back around. And so Bree kind of compares it to the oaths, but Lucille like immediately disagrees. And I think it's always interesting to me when they like bring their knowledge of magic from the order into these situations, and like the root crafters are immediately like, nah, get the fuck out of here with that. Like we're not doing that. We are not in the order. But she makes it like very, I think, important distinction saying that like oaths bind with intention, but then they punish the deviations. So it's not like it's not your own will. It's like a fear that you'll be punished for not doing the thing that you said you would do, as opposed to doing it because you actually want to do it. And so she says that volition is for teaching and not punishment, which also goes back to the fact that this is a plantation too, right? Like it's not they're not trying to like recreate those same kind of like systems of oppression and like punishment and violence in the way that they teach and use this magic. So yeah, I thought that was like a really important I guess distinction
It's
between
really
like root
interesting.
craft.
It's really interesting too when you think about it through like systems as well of like, what am I trying to say? Like punishment and setting you up, like, or criminalization or whatever. It's like how you kind of govern through fear versus governing through hope, or and keeping people in line. And we see the Order do this a lot, especially with like Cell and the Merlins, about like demonia and like falling prey to your blood and all of this stuff. And like I was thinking a lot about certain ways that I felt in like religious settings in which it'd be like all that like kind of like fire and brimstone, and like having you kind of like come to this morality through fear of punishment, or what would happen if you're not good, as opposed to like inspiring kind of hope, or just an appreciation for just doing the right thing, right? And having that just kind of be your guide, and like kindness and empathy and all of those things. And it kind of feels like a very strong kind of like, I mean, ether and root are the same force, right? But it's more about the people wielding it and how they see the world, and how they see the use of this force. And so it's just really interesting to think about Bree, and we've talked about this before, like Bree coming and understanding a lot of this stuff through the lens of the Order, and then being kind of confronted with like over and over again being confronted with like the deviations and the ways in which it doesn't need to be that way. And I think it's nice in a way for her to start to really grapple with like, I think like there's a way of learning in which you're always trying to kind of connect it to what you already know, right? So that's kind of how she's also learning about what's going on. But I think it's also nice to kind of grapple with the fact that like you know this through this lens, but you can reframe. And I older Black women don't sugarcoat stuff a lot of times sometimes, but like Lou would just tell her, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like tell her what it is.
Yeah, I think the point with the Order and the oaths being like an oppressive tool, like we saw that in Legendborn, where she was getting acquainted with like them having shackles to like take out people who used magic in a different way than the Order was like okay with them using, because they're outside of the Order. But also within the Order, the oaths are punishment. We saw what happened with Jonas, and also what happened to Dud Davis whenever like he finally got like the like you could visually see how those oaths are automatically gonna like call in the guilt or the punishment that they're like set to build in, and like how this you don't have the same thing with the root community, which is really interesting to me, because it's like the Order basically is using that power to be for combat in a way that the root crafters don't really have that combat system. When you think about combat training, like when you're learning it, like they teach you not to do certain things or react certain ways with a punishment. Like they'll like, okay, got your neck. Okay, now you learn not to do that. Like, okay, you don't be clear in showing how you're about to move, because you will be immediately punished for that. And that's how they learn how to get better. But it's a system of punishment. And like you're sitting there trying to think about how to get better in order to avoid punishment. Whereas in Root, they're not learning to like look at things as a punishment or another. They're looking to like work in communion with the ancestors and like as like they will. And so I just love that like that's as thoughtful in the crafting and how they kind of like are juxtaposed to each other the whole story through. So it's like it's not that, and that's like I think the thing that a lot of times we kind of take for granted is that people take for granted that a system of oppression has existed for a while, and yeah, there's still like components of it that we see today, but you know, it doesn't have to be that deep, but it's like it's everywhere. It doesn't just like sit and not actually also persecute the people who are doing the oppression. They're also taking part in the oppression themselves as it's going on. So it's like I just really enjoy that that's written into it. So you're like not sitting here thinking like, oh, kind of not to take it to politics, but like, oh, aren't they like kind of the same thing? Aren't they just two different groups using the same kind of powers, but in different kind of ways? It's like, no, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in between the two different. There's differences that are very apparent.
Yeah, and like a very like a
Yeah.
distinction between, which is what they've been saying, but it's also like it's cool to actually see it because I think Patricia maybe mentions it in Legendborn. Like it's just like these different philosophies and like you know, just they have different value system, and so that affects how you use this tool that is like that you've been given or that exists. So yeah, so Lucille is like, well, you know, we'll start in the morning. But now it's time for dinner. So they go out to the barn, which is like this big space inside for I think Bree says like it could hold up to like 100 people. So like, you know, cookouts and get-togethers and that kind of thing. So they have like the outdoor cooking, they have I think the original kitchen that's kind of now been outfitted. One thing I love is that Will and Cell they like ask to check the perimeter or whatever, but it's also like I know they were like, "Yep, let's get them out of this kitchen." Like we don't need y'all in the way. We got it together. Y'all go check the perimeter, and we'll make this food. So Alice is helping Mariah. Bree is like setting the table and then helps Hazel snap green beans, which makes her think of her dad. And then I'm like, I think that's when I was like, she should definitely call him. And also I don't even think it's been that many days since she did call him. So but that was the other thing is like I said that and then I was like, well, it actually hasn't been that long since she last talked to him. There's just a lot that's been happening. And she said, I'm not gonna be able to like call like anytime soon or whatever, but it's still in my head was like, you should hit him up.
A text perhaps?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't think she has a phone right now, but somebody does. Mariah got a phone.
But she did say, yeah, when she was in her room, she was like, there's a phone cable that I can't use because I don't have a phone. I'm like, well.
But yeah, so that made me laugh. But also I just love, it's just like a very like cool kind of communal moment. That's kind of like the calm between two storms, you know, just like we know that she's about to kind of embark on this new kind of like not magical journey, but just she's going to like be learning a lot in the next day. And so it's just kind of moment of like still resetting, eating good food, hanging out with folks, and just kind of being in community. But towards the end of dinner, Bree does ask like what she can expect tomorrow. They talk about her bloodcraft and blood offerings because they kind of ask her like, you know, I think they're like, Mariah said you don't really make offerings in the same way that they do. You know, usually they'll lay out food or like something like that. And so Bree's like, well, I use blood. And then the conversation turns to her being able to call Nick through the blood walks, which like Lucille and Hazel one have never heard of before. And then also Hazel gets really like nerdy about it, which is really cute. Cause one, they're like, okay, so we've heard of, you know, being able to walk through your memory, like the memories of like your ancestors. And like even being able to talk to them. It's like certain things where they're like, hey, these things that you can do are rare among root crafters, but not unheard of. But this whole thing of being able to bring like a live person into their ancestral stream to then communicate with you is something that's like literally you've never heard of that before. So Hazel gets nerdy and is theorizing that it could have something to do with epigenetics and that Bree is navigating like DNA memory. William obviously gets equally as nerdy and is really excited about the fact that Hazel is talking about science in like relation to this magic, and like that's when we find out that Hazel is a doctor of biology. And so this is like her like she likes to kind of mold, or I guess, combine again like the science and the magic of this world.
Can I just say, first off, we really should have thought this through because we needed Doc. I just pinged her to see if she'll hop on. But we weren't.
We don't read
maybe we can put something. Maybe we can ask if maybe we can ask her if she can like record
bonus episode.
Something. Yeah, or I was gonna say like just
she's
record
coming
something for like social. Oh, is she coming?
Yeah.
I pinged her. Hi, Kishana.
Like, we need you. But
for context for folks who don't know, Kishana is a virologist and badass
microbiologist.
Mm-hmm.
And loves it when we talk science, me especially, for all of the ways we don't know what we're talking about, me especially. But I do love when there is this moment of like magic and science like coming together. Like, we're in a fantasy book and they're talking about epigenetics. I don't even know what epigenetics is. It sounds made up. I know it's not, but it sounds made up. But like, Cell talks about how I think it's Cell who talks about how they bind oaths to the DNA as well. And I'm like, so is there like, like, I'm so sorry. If you have like a virus, right? It like is like something like outside, or bacteria, that's like an outside force that like comes into your system, and then your like immune system is like fighting it off or whatever. Could you then say that like there is like a magical, like, could I? Because we also see this when they did they drugged her and William and like was like tamping down the power and stuff. Can I like put their DNA under a microscope and like see the like cells that are magic? Is that what's happening? Like, can I like isolate them? Like, could Alice, who doesn't have the sight, for example, like put some DNA in like the CRISPR or whatever that thing is called and scramble it up and then like change her power set, or like get how does that, what do you mean? What do you mean? Is it magic or is it not? Is it science? It can't be both.
It can be both.
I think it can be both. I think that's kind of the point.
It can
Why
be.
not?
I think I like Marvel's like answer the most because I enjoyed Thor for doing this, for bringing this up. Like the Marvel's answer is that like, and I think this is like something that I've seen in a lot of like fantasy stories recently, is that magic is the science that we don't have an answer for yet. Like it's like science fiction where it's like, oh, like people were thinking about things that, because people were able to think through science fiction, there are some scientific marvels that were able to come into creation because people were like, oh, maybe we can make that happen, right? So I enjoy that. Like magic is like sitting in that on that line. For me, I was laughing at the fact that like, as we're waiting for an answer, I was enjoying the fact that like Bree in this moment is basically a scientific and magical marvel, which was like, it's like weird to be the person who's like, I'm a specimen of interest. Like that's just like, do I like this? And she's kind of like eating it up a little bit.
So Doc says epigenetics are changes in the DNA on small levels, and so it doesn't change the overall gene, but what's expressed. This is giving me mutants, right? And I guess, yes, okay, it can be both magic and science. But does that mean what I'm trying to say is like, if you know what to look for, if you're like Alice, but have some knowledge of science and ether, magic, whatever, can they, or I guess like the Merlins or whatever they did with when they were messing with those drugs, can they then like isolate those things? So Doc says magical beings likely have some differences in DNA, and if it's changes in DNA on a small level and doesn't change the overall gene, can you manipulate that?
In what way?
In a lab?
I mean,
I don't know what way. This is very science, but like, can I be like, okay, so
like you mean in terms of like what a person's like, can you manipulate like how the magic shows up in someone? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or like, so if this is my big thing. So I am anemic, right? And I have to take the stupid iron pill. And like, why can't I just go to the doctor and they just shoot a bunch of iron in me and just reset that shit? Or like, my body don't make serotonin. Like, you make the serotonin in the lab and then you put it in a pill. And I think this is capitalism. Don't laugh at me, but laugh at me if you're sure. Like, and so it's a capitalistic thing to be like, oh, you have to take this pill every day, as opposed to just shooting that shit or giving me the gene that makes the serotonin. Just do it.
Kishana says it's called an iron infusion, but it's probably capitalism.
I want that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever told me about an iron infusion. Anyway.
Because you don't have enough capital for them to be like,
I'm taking this goddamn pill for damn near 40 years. And I still don't got enough iron.
Let's not even tempt you with something you can't have, because if you were in that price bracket, you wouldn't be seeing me. You'd be seeing another doctor. Being a specialist, you'd be seeing someone with a higher pay grade than me. So let's just keep you where you need to be kept.
This is a thing I could do. Anyway. So then you don't have to take the goddamn pill every Anyway. So then this is like, plot and all this stuff. But instead of her being at Volition, just go to a magical scientist and be like, unlock this shit so I can use it without being in mortal danger. Is that not a thing?
Well, I mean, the thing is that this is like a so first of all, like the Order, they're relying on undergraduate pre-med student to keep everybody
and Dr.
in
Hazel's
their thing healed. So I don't really think they think they're balling, but it's not like they are like on the forefront of magical epigenetics. So there's that.
Well, they are, the Regents because they were able to make that fucking shit, but they're not sharing it.
Yes, but they're not sharing it, and it's also like what they're not sharing it. It's like what their goals are. And they're also the only ones with, like, at least as far as we can tell, they have the most resources to even like do that. But why would they? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, it's like, I'm sure if they're trying to enhance, they're looking at it in a way that they were trying to enhance like the other Legendborn, like to use their powers. Like, one, does that really suit what they want? Because like them being in constant battle with the Shadowborn suits the needs of the Regents, so that they're not looking too hard at like interplaying with the Regents. But two, like, would it burn them out? Would abatement then come sooner, and then they'd have to like go through this more frequently than they actually really want to. So I'm sure that there's reasons, besides the evil mustache rubbing contingent that they are, that do want to like be thoughtful about suppressing the genes to like in order to use them. I'm sure there's other reasons why, like, because like they're way too, I feel like they're too into having super soldiers to not want to make them super soldiers, but I feel like there has to be like reasons why they tested it and they didn't want to like actually use it on the Legendborn.
Also, it makes me think about, if they weren't evil and trying to like maintain control, they could actually have spent that time researching abatement and trying to help them fix that part.
But also, it's like
That,
yeah, they could. But I think part of it would be them learning. I think that answer is more them learning, like, I mean, I don't know if they could learn it because it was like the oaths or whatever, but they'd have to they'd have to end the lines to do that, I think, because that's just the like blowback of the nature of their spell or whatever. But yeah, Kishana's saying
You'd have to
in
discover
theory, Bree could
immortality.
take something to enhance or suppress magic if they know what to do, which like the regents did create that thing to like suppress it, but we don't know if they did that. Or she said if they know what to target. And then she said that to end abatement, you'd basically have to discover immortality. And then she says the magic seems to burn through their telomeres quickly, which what's that?
That is not a word.
That's not a science term I ever got to in my high school. And I took AP chemistry. Did not come up with biology.
Looks familiar, but I promise you I don't know what it means.
I never got there. No, I'm gonna tell you straight up. I never got there.
This is what is that thing that Star Wars is all about that I realized I found out like recently is actually real.
Midichlorians?
The microbes, the mitochondriates.
The midichlorians.
I thought that was a
midichlorians from Star Wars.
Yeah, that's like a real thing.
I don't. Is it?
I'm just laughing at good science fiction. We just are like
literal parts
what
of
is
your
true?
genes.
What is
telomere?
fiction?
Okay, wait. She says when your telomeres get too short, you die. They're parts of your genes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking it up.
Today we learned.
We just you know how you can't believe everything that you read on the internet just because she got that PhD and she be teaching the youth and she's a scientist who's brilliant. Don't be making up shit.
Not you saying that about the actual PhD versus like the whole like Star Wars. What's his face? George Lucas.
Right. The midichlorian. You over here.
I just found out that was real. I just found out that was real.
You're over here validating midichlorians over here doubting the PhD. Come on.
Midichlorians, are they?
Someone said it in like a non-Star Wars context when I said, isn't that shit from Star Wars? And they were like,
no.
No, it's real. It's a real thing. I don't know what science classes y'all are taking.
Are you talking about midichlorians versus like mitochondria?
Are they not the same?
No, those aren't the same thing.
I want to know who you're. I don't know what
I'm like, Robyn's over here spreading misinformation while we have an actual doctor on the line.
Were they saying midichlorians or were they saying mitochondria?
I'm literally sitting here like, bro, no, this can't be right.
I hear you saying what I think is like midichlorians from Star Wars, but I'm like mitochondria. Not that, like, come on. And mitochondria, may I add, is something that we at least hit in like, I want to say 8th grade, if not like early high school.
Oh my god!
Girl, I don't remember anything that I learned. I don't remember high school. How am I supposed to remember 8th grade?
Oh my gosh! I was really sitting here like, no, they like, did I miss something? Wow.
Okay. So, to recap, Doc be making up words, but some of those words are real things. And epigenetics can explain some of this stuff, and the Legendborn are basically mutants.
So epigenetics, and please, Dr. Kishana, tell me if I'm being stupidly wrong, but epigenetics is, I think, the thing that showed us that like stress and anxiety from previous generations can be passed on. That's what happened with like victims of the Holocaust. That's what happens with people who
were
trauma. That's what epigenetics is. So when you're talking about mutants is a different kind of genetics. That's just genetics and not epigenetics. So like, I'm just trying to clarify here. Thank you, Dr. Kashana.
Because Dr. Kashana says Porshèa is correct. Apparently, Robyn should just be quiet. Fine. I still don't understand, but fine. So basically, the O's are akin to epigenetic trauma. And so is the blood mark. At least Bree's blood mark, in the way that it has been passed down, and the bargain of like one daughter at a time for all time. So Doc says mutants are genetics because mutants have actual gene changes, but then when we went way up there, epigenetics is not changes in the genes, but how
genes are expressed.
They're expressed. And then she said the root gene might be overexpressed in a certain moment. So under stress, when Bree shoots out like the mage flame, her root gene is overexpressed in that moment. And also, I need to go to the doctor and ask about an iron infusion, and if my insurance will cover that. That's crazy that that's a thing that they can just do. Who knew? Who knew?
Thank you, Dr. Kashana, for
Thank
everything
you.
you bring to this podcast, including medical recommendations that we do not have any background and information
and
on.
Also mitochondria and midichlorians are not the same thing.
I don't know why. I don't know.
They sound similar.
I want to know where that conversation, like how the people on the other side of the conversation were
taking just probably were like, you know what, let's move on. You know, it's like the thing from Star Wars. That's real. And either they didn't know enough about Star Wars to correct me, or they just decided it wasn't worth the fight or the time to correct me. And I also need to go back and however many people I told, did you know that the Star Wars thing is not fiction? You probably need to correct the record.
Also, a quick Google search shows me that midichlorians is a bacteria.
So it is a real thing.
Not chlorians, and they're not within the bloodstream. So it's science fiction. We take things, we make things make another meaning, and then they're fiction.
I said, but they're not mitochondria.
They're not mitochondria, no matter what happens.
Either way. Okay, cool. So
science power hour. We're just like, okay.
No, that was great. I love that. So
we really do need to get Doc a podcast where she just the science of fiction. I named it for you.
Boom. So I think it's Hazel who says this, that communing with the ancestors requires a connection that runs in both directions, spiritual and physical, an open channel on both sides, tying each party to each other like blood. In this case, Cell, again, this is like the second time in this chapter that it's compared to an oath, except the oaths bind people together, or people to like a group, versus like tying to like a person to like their ancestors. And then Bree kind of like, she gets kind of emotional at that moment, and she thanks everyone for being there with her on this journey. Alice jokes that not running for their lives is the new vacation. And like Cell and William are like, or William's like, we need an actual vacation. And then Lucille says that she's glad that Bree's here. But then she's like, I hope for everyone's sake that you get the answers you're looking for. And I'm like, ma'am, please, let's end on an optimistic note, not a foreboding one. My goodness. So yeah. That's where that chapter ends.
I do like, though, it's just like, let's set some expectation that we're going to help you speak to the ancestors, and you're going to ask the ancestors the questions, but there are still limitations to what they know. It's not, they're not all powerful.
Yeah.
And like what we learn when Valak shows the Bloodmarked, and I don't know that Bree has internalized this, but we talked about it during that episode, is that like Veer doesn't even know that she's made this deal with Erebus. Like, and who knows what they find out after they pass on. Like, I don't think they learn more unless it's been explicitly like in these moments in which they're communing. I don't know. I would love to know, like, can Bree's mom now speak and learn from her mother, or does she just know what she knew at the time unless a medium comes and like facilitates that communication, right? So
yeah,
we'll kind of see this a little bit, but I do like, as much as the science of it confuses the fuck out of me, I do like that there are limitations to what the ancestors can glean and share, and they're not just like all omniscient beings once they pass.
And over. I think it's important too, because it's just like, you know, sometimes we put a lot on our ancestors in a way that kind of like, well, I think in some ways it makes sense to like deify them, but in other ways it makes sense to like remember that they're people and they, you know, it's possible that they see like, you know, things as we're experiencing them and have, you know, from their own life experiences like a certain amount of wisdom to kind of impart or to like kind of guide, but at the same time they only know what they know. And I think that that's also kind of what Bree, like going into this next chapter, kind of has to learn, and then she kind of like can't fully accept in this moment. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but like I think that that's also an important lesson somewhere in here, is that like she's expecting all these answers to just be here, and for somebody to just have them, and sometimes they don't, because life is weird like that, and people can only learn as much as they can, you know.
And everyone's experiences are going to color what they take, their takeaways from those learnings too. I think that's also important when we think about like the ancestors and what they were grappling with, but also like their immediate concerns in the time, right? And we kind of get this too. We're going a little bit further ahead again. Porshèa will get there, but like their concerns are different, and their immediate dangers are different than what Bree's facing and what Bree has decided, right? Like we talked about at the end of, or at some point in this book, like Bree decides now that she's gonna fight, but like a lot of them were just running and hiding and surviving, and so that is gonna also color their perception and what they know and how they moved with this power. So,
and that, you guys, is a summary of chapter 48. There you go.
Sorry.
We had
Yay. To. So right out of the calm dinner time like fire into the like less like warm, cozy, more into the fiery bellows of like practicing getting in communion with her ancestors, which you would not think would be that fiery, but we'll get to why it is. Bree the next day shows up at the like barn where Lou and Hazel are setting up the welcoming practice. Like they're going around in a ring, and they're smoking on something that Bree's like, it ain't none of my business. It don't smell like tobacco, and that's all I'm gonna say. And then she later said that later on we see it's a joint. So legit, but I do appreciate Bree being automatically like, that ain't none of my business.
Right. I have to say, as I get older, I was never one of the kids that was gonna experiment with, I was an anxious bean, okay? I just didn't, it was illegal, it was wrong, I wasn't doing it, right? And I knew that my like cousins and brother, like the kid like in my range were experimenting at certain times and smoking and whatever. I know some of them that were just straight up potheads and are straight up pot. I am fascinated by the amount of people of my elders and that auntie level that are also straight up potheads.
Yeah.
They had to have been the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Like I remember
And now my generation be smoking with their generation, and I'm like,
yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah. I think part of it though is because like obviously we grew up in a time of like, you know, just say no and like, hey, this is your brain on drugs and like so it's all of that. And then like
Criminalization.
some of
Yeah.
our people in that generation are very like staunchly against weed and like all that stuff. And like maybe in the more recent
The
time
devil's
have like
lettuce.
become a little like lax because it's legal in a lot of like most places across the country. But like so I think there's that part of it. But I remember when I was maybe in high school when I realized that, and it's not that I realized that my dad smoked, but it was like, oh, of course, like it was confirmed. You know what I mean? Like there was something that got mentioned, and in my brain, I was like all of these memories that I had that as a kid, I didn't really know what that was. But then as like someone who is I was a teenager at the time, so like I had friends who smoked and all that kind of stuff, and then I was like, oh, duh, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of shifts your context, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a very interesting thing to just be like, oh, yeah. I've been doing this the whole time and I just didn't realize. And I've been inundated with all of this like stuff to tell me that it's bad and not to do it. And then you're like, oh, but y'all been doing it, so it's can't be that bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it is like, it'll be like you said, like your dad and stuff who are like obviously doing fine and are like productive members of society who are not. You're just like, oh, so a lot of that was just fear mongering and like Porshèa said, like the criminalization and all of that stuff, and not based in anything beyond like
it's a gateway drug. Like
gateway
to
you're like gateway to where?
Gateway to where? What are we doing?
A professorship? A PhD? Like
shrooms, perhaps. Psychedelics, I could see, but like, I don't think it's going. I think it's funny because like, I like that it's Lou and Hazel who are the ones who are doing it, because I feel like when I grew up, if there's anywhere where it was gonna be like the house where the folks were getting into like more like drinking and more, it was like my great aunt's house. Like the aunties are the ones who were like the generation of the like, yeah, like we drinking, we smoking, we chilling over here.
I'm at the point now where it's like, so my aunties are like retiring and like just becoming just like really just embracing potheadness. And I'm like, oh, like not even like, oh, y'all been doing this, which is like one thing, but like, yeah, like they're just like, okay, now I don't got shit else to do, so I'm just gonna smoke and drink and eat and play in my garden.
My grandma my dad's mom has been a smoker, but she was like a cigarette smoker and also a drinker. Like I've always known her to be the grandma that's what she does. So more recently when she's been retired, but she's had health struggles and she's like needed, like she's not supposed to smoke. So then she's like looking for edibles. I'm like, I can help you with edibles. Right. With that, I don't know, bro. Like I don't gotta connect with that. I don't gotta. So it's been funny to be like, I guess like if I were to like take myself out and speak about it to someone, and they'd be like, "You are your grandma's plug." Like sometimes, you know, you do what you gotta do.
Like on occasion, yeah. No, it's always funny to me because I'm like, I know that I have very easy access, but I just don't like. It's like if I wanted to, I could, but I don't.
Ugh, this reminds me of a time that we will not get into on this podcast, but I will talk to you about later, Porshèa, when I lived with them.
I know what you're talking about.
And yeah. I was summoned to bake a cake. That's all I will say. I got in the kitchen.
What's it called?
Sure.
The pandemic.
I was on a
That's
baking
the last
binge.
time. Cause I'll have edible. I don't like smoking because I have asthma, so that shit does not feel good to me at all. But I was highly, it was a high stress time, and yeah.
I was baking through the stress, and they were doing something else, and it just melded.
And then it just, yeah.
It was mutually beneficial in that moment.
And I was like, oh, just get your measurements correct, and you're all good. Just do what you gotta do.
Just do what you gotta do.
I love it. Even Dr. Kashana, like, we all know plugs. We all have familial things happening. I'm trying to put your people's information in the streets. But yes.
No. Yeah. I mean,
it's legal in most places, but I also don't know. You know what I mean? So.
But it's just really funny to be like, because we still have, like, like you said, like, indoctrinated into, like, DARE, and I was a DARE mentor. Guys, like, that's where I was at. But also I got out of class. Probably got out of science class, which I know I got out of some class, but it was either science or math, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll mentor some middle schoolers about being straight edge. It's just funny because of that, and like the way in which Bree just kind of like does it without saying it. And it's none of my business. But shut up, because Doc said you probably should have. We all know I should have stayed in science class.
Clearly.
I feel like you have so many curiosity. You have so much curiosity about science, and I'm like, why didn't you just like check it out?
Because it hurts my brain, and none of it makes sense. It's like it's basically in math when they brought in like real algebra, and it wasn't like 7 plus x equals 10, and then x is 3. I understood that, like, x is just a placeholder. When it was like 7a times 4b equals y, I was like, what the fuck? Where'd the letters? And then I just shut down. A lot of it was undiagnosed ADHD and neurospiciness and not knowing what to do with it. And a lot of it was also being socialized as a smart one, and then like truly not understanding something for the first time and not knowing how to study and like work at understanding something.
You just explained math. Science, though.
No, science was the same thing. It was like, I don't understand this. It doesn't come easily, and I'd have to work at it. And also at that time, I was, whatever. I was just like, it just works. I don't care how it works. I don't even understand why I would have been a great fundamentalist, because I don't understand why we gotta learn this shit. It works. Stop asking questions. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay? I don't care why. I don't photosynthesis is what broke me. I said, I don't give a fuck. Okay?
But synthesis is so early.
Exactly, and it broke me. I said the sun makes, things grow. Chlorophyll. Period. End of sentence. Period.
Well,
why are we spending all this time in the minutia? The sun helps things grow.
Okay.
It's a full sentence.
So
moving on.
Talking about growing.
Keep going.
So this is my little aside for what's about to happen here. This whole time we're seeing Hazel and Lou set up the circle. Bree's about to be in a circle doing things in the circle. The active, non-active people in and around the circle are Lou, Hazel, and Bree. There's a whole little like
peanut gallery.
But like, what is that called? Like the stands? Whatever. They're just like there's Sel, Alice, and Will are just sitting there, and they're guests. I get it, they're guests. However, them and like Alice is noted as watching intently, which is like, girl, are you about to try to like recreate this later? I can't. And then they're all watching. The other two are part of the order, and I feel like this feels a bit voyeuristic. It feels a bit.
It reminds me of like teaching hospitals when they have the gallery basically watching surgeries and stuff. That's what it felt like to me. And yeah, that's voyeuristic.
Because it's like a cultural kind of like a like.
Oh, they're like
it feels
sitting
like
in on a
the
cultural
culture in a fishbowl. It feels like the World's Fair, whenever they have like these different those different like villages, quote unquote, with different ethnicities, and it's like, are you here for the ethnic activities today? And you're just like watching people having to play act their culture, and like this isn't in play acting, but it feels a little bit too similar to that to me. I don't
see,
like
and I took it as like yes, it is that like an anthropological and things like that, but I was born with an audience, so there was a class watching me be birthed, and I just took it as like one of those like that's how you pass on knowledge to people who can't experience it or whatever. But I do see the grossness. Like I see how you also see that as like a voyeurism. I think it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Why should they be learning? Why should they be taught? Is my question.
For me, in this instance, it's because they are the ones that are going to be with Bree and need to like also understand kind of if there's ways in which they can help, because she's saying the problem is I have to almost be dead before I'm useful in battle, or I have to be in such a life-threatening position, and I want to get ahead of that. And so if like you know, like Cell can tell when like, I mean, when they got caught in the woods, right? Cell knew right away. He was like, run and or get behind. Like, well, he said run, and she didn't listen. But like, they can give her as much forewarning to like power up as possible if they understand. Like, if it comes that she needs time to power up or whatever. So them specifically, not the order, not we're not taking these lessons back to the bigger like organization, but these three specifically on the run with her, it could be useful.
I don't see it. Like I feel
and also
like
moral support.
I feel like Hazel and Lou knew the setup, so like I don't feel like it's something that like they could like. I feel like they're allowing them in because for Bree's moral support, but I feel like generally like something that like they could have taught Bree, and Bree would be like it was not necessary.
I also
like, oh.
I guess the other thing too is like the information that they're trying to get or that she's trying to get, like they can hear it, so it could also be a sense of like, you know, sometimes if you have like folks click on different parts of information, right, when you're getting them. So I'm not saying that's what it is, but I could see that also being something of like, we're all sitting here and we're like, Bree's asking these questions, we're all hearing it and taking it in. It's like Will might lock onto something in there that Bree might have missed, or Alice might click onto something different than Cell would. You know what I mean? But I also I get what you're saying, and I do agree. Like, but I also feel like because of the nature of their relationships, because they are friends and because they've been going through this thing together, like I think it also makes, because it's like part of it is Bree trying to learn how to use her magic, but also like there's another part of it that has to do with information, and I think that does pertain to them in terms of like what the journey they still have to go, and like they've been on it together, so I think it makes sense that they would want to also be around.
I also took it as like everything at Volition you need to ask permission for, especially those three. And so I took it as like off page or something, they asked permission to sit there, and Bree gave, and like Hazel and Lou said like that's up to Bree because it's Bree's ancestors, it's Bree going through this thing. And I don't think that they're worried about Cell or Will recreating this circle. And then Bree also noticed they have a similar type of thing in the order. Because I think she said like the last time she's in a circle like this was at the Olgoth or something.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's one of those things of like cultural differences and like seeing how the same kind of practice has been changed or shifted over time. But I also assume
It wasn't the
they were
ritual
given-
that was the similar. It was the powers. Like it was her calling on her family line that was similar.
Okay.
So yeah, I just bring it up as an asterisk of I don't like it. On to the next
Yeah,
part.
and that's completely fair.
Yeah.
So another thing that's like funny is that Bree is not like the other supernatural girls, okay? Like whereas you're Buffy or some other fantasy girly, if you're asking her, you know, like, do you have your ceremonial like instrument you're gonna use to call upon your blood, they're gonna come in with like a cute little dagger or like, you know, their favorite pocket knife or something. Bree's like, I disinfected this pin and I was gonna prick my finger. Whoopity doo. And I love how like Hazel and like Lou look at her when she does this. Like, I mean, I guess what works, but like it's funny because it's like I'm sure they were not expecting her to like
pull up with a paper
pull
clip.
out
a safety pin.
and
A safety pin.
and I can just imagine their faces being like, well, okay, all right,
that'll do it.
Like the girl has not been around the ceremonial space of recrafters, and it shows because she showed up here with a little
from her pocket.
All right, okay, all right. I mean, and it's, you know, it's more convenient on the road, I suppose, you know.
And if it works, it works.
It works. And, exactly. And I'm like, I think they gave the line that like my grandma loves to give, which is, if you like it, I love it. And like, girl, we know you don't like it, but okay. All right.
It's one of my favorite lines, by the way.
Same. She's also a Cancer, so I could see that. Yes.
Oh, I feel like I just got.
That's the same. Like, I love that for you. I love that for you. I love that as like a phrase because it can mean like it can be sincere and it can be in that like if you like it, I love it. Like, it's like
that shady way.
Yeah,
I love that for you is something that one of my Aries friends also uses. So again.
Yes. But it's like it's both. It depends on the context. It's like sometimes it's like no, I genuinely say that.
I'm genuinely happy for you.
And
yeah, and then other times it's like
I say similar things before. Like I've said something more similar to you. I love that. Like oh, that's really cute on you. And I'm not being away. I'm like that looks cute on you. I don't think I could see anybody else working that and it would look as cute. It just I just don't think it would translate. But it's really cute on you. On you. And I mean it. So when Lou and Hazel finish the ritual, they tell Bree to see the circle as a ceremony for the amplification of her ancestral stream, one where she can talk to all of them at once instead of the one by one that she's been doing. Which set me up in my brain for a different thing than what we actually get, but we'll get there.
I know I did too. I was there with you.
But I do understand what they mean in the sense of like the other times Bree has only been able to like she calls on one and then when she's done talking to them it like literally is over. Like she would have to do it again to she would have to prick herself again to do it.
But I just like what my brain said I was about to get versus what the page gave me. Yeah. And this reminds her, whenever they tell her that reminds her of the Ogoth and when she was inside of a flaming circle, when the last time she spoke to her ancestors and how like explosive it was, like and how her powers were. So she's like doubly relieved to have the protection of the circle that Lou and Hazel just created, as well as the protection of the Volition. So she knows that like basically she's glad she's about to be demon bait once again because she knows she has protection for what's about to go down.
It's about to go down.
So then things
I was just gonna say that I think it's really funny that the way in which Hazel and Lou are like giving this information and like I don't know how to like properly explain this, but like the sense of like you said, like like this is a ceremony that they go through and they have like their rituals, and it's very symbolic and tied to a lot of the setup in that ritual, like the process is a part of that for them. And to have Bree, who's new here, just kind of like thinking about it in such practical terms. And in one way, I get it, because she doesn't have the luxury of time or of doing this removed from the fight that she's in and like the danger that she's in. But it also is like a funny thing of like, I don't know, like it's like if you are going, so on the weekends, this is like a weird analogy, but on the weekends I like to like make really fancy, difficult coffee for myself. Like I'll use a mocha pot or an AeroPress or like a pour over, and it's slow and whatever. But then if I got like something to do, if it's like Monday and I have a meeting, it's drip coffee, put it in my veins, like hurry up. And like that is more of a matter of like practicality and necessity than it is. But like I do enjoy that like process, right? And so I think about like just rest and like Bree's getting rest, and like will she ever be able to like get a ceremonial knife or you know, like do this in a way, and then like talk to her ancestors in what we're about to see is a very practical, and it's almost impersonal, even though she's about to talk to her ancestors. Like, can you help me with this thing?
It's urgent.
No? Okay, next. Like, yeah, it's very urgent, and it feels in the way that it's set up and stuff that it's not meant to be like that. Like in a optimal setting, I guess, or a regular setting, it's meant to be more healing and exploratory than it is. So I also just was like thinking about like what you said, Porshèa, with what you were expecting, not only with like how she speaks to the ancestors, but like in the tone in which she speaks to the ancestors, and it was very jarring for me.
Talking about jarring, let's talk about who the first ancestor, because the way that she's supposed to go about this ceremony is that she's supposed to call the most recent ones first and then eventually get down to Vera. So who is Bree's most recent ancestor? Oh, grief, trauma, it's her mother. So things get really real. She invokes her mother's name, and then suddenly, here comes her mother, Miss Faye Matthews, walking out of the flames. Bree cannot help but to immediately run to her, hoping for a hug, which she receives, but she finds that it feels nothing like the human contact that she's used to, and instead it just feels like her own root. So not only is she getting the interaction with the person that she, in the way she wants to interact with that person, but it will never feel the same as it used to her. Because
calm down, Porshèa. Damn.
Realm of interaction.
Yeah.
Tracy,
I mean, I will say,
you don't need to add you.
I will say, just going off of what Robyn was saying, and I wanted to wait till after Faye comes to say this, like, I think she's also, and this is not in like a blaming way, but I do think she's also why it doesn't go the way that Bree is expecting, or that even like Lou and Hazel are expecting, because it pulls up this grief that, like, you know, this book is, or this series is like literally rooted in Bree's like grief of losing her mom. And so to have her show up first, they have this conversation, and then like there's even a touch on the grief that Bree holds, and then for her to go, like, she doesn't take any time to process that. She just goes straight into like what I need and what I need and what I, you know what I mean? Like, again, her thought of what her actual intention is to get stronger. Which may not actually be. I don't know what the answer is. I'm sure we'll learn it by the time we get to like the end of this book, like what she actually needs in this moment, or like what she, you know, really wants
desires
to see.
Her base desire is, yeah.
And I think we're definitely gonna get there. But here she it's very clear that she doesn't actually know, and her expectation of what she's gonna get is not what she, you know what I mean? It's just not adding up. And on top of that, like her mom, it just opens her up in the emotional way that I think that she knew but didn't fully like account for, or couldn't be really prepared for.
Yeah. Also, I think oh, well, let's just move on. We'll get there.
Yeah. Bree is 16. I just want to know, she's 16, and she's on a journey of figuring out like what her true desires are, and I feel like this is under the like vestige of like a lot of trauma and grief at the same time while trying to get this. And I like grown adults with so much more going right for them in their life have been on similar journeys and of like finding out their true desires and it not go as well. Or as like early, like getting understanding of it. So I appreciate that this is like the story is getting us there, but there's a lot. Including Bree's mom calling her honey bunch. And Bree responding, because I just like thinking about like you were saying, Bayana, about like how this like just is like taking her somewhere emotionally, is transporting her into like this relationship. Her mom immediately calls her like, you know, a nickname that her mom probably is only because we don't hear her dad call her this. And it touches a part of Bree where she just automatically responds by calling her mom mommy and not mama, or just like mommy. Like again, talking about base desire of being with her mother as a child again. And it's all very touching and sob inducing. And it does not help that Alice, who is in the stands, in the bleachers, is full of tears. And then Miss Faye's interacting with Alice too, and thanks her and as well as Will and Sel for taking care of Bree. So everyone's got tears in their eyes. Just a mess.
I was thinking about Alice's reaction too, in terms of like, I mean, we talked a little bit about like, you know, Alice experiencing that loss too, how close their families are, how close Alice is to that, like, to their family, in which like they fully like Faye is not surprised to see Alice. It's more of a like, I knew it, you know what I mean? Like they are family in a way that Candace Owens will never understand. But that idea of like Alice's grief over losing Bree's mom will never be the same kind of grief, and no one is expecting it to be, but that like that moment to me was just like, oh, it lends itself to like how it's just not one person losing someone, right? Like you start to think about Bree's father, because she talks about Bree's father. You think about like Alice losing, and not only Alice losing Faye, but losing the person that Bree was with her mother around, you know what I mean? Like that loss changes a lot of things. And it really goes into who I bench and why. But it just like really, like I said, like a lot of things in these books where I feel like, oh man, it's when the world expands. And this is one of those where like, I don't think the world expands, but it does like really remind you of like the consequences beyond what Bree is experiencing, even though we are very focused on Bree and her story and stuff. But just like, yeah, like a person isn't lost by just one person alone. Like you're not you're not grieved by, or how do I say it? Many people experience the grief of the loss of one person. And it's different, and it's personal to each person, but like it changes interactions between people as well. It changed that this loss changed Bree. It changed Alice. It changed Bree and Alice's relationship. It changed like her father. It changed Bree and Bree's father's relationship. It changes the relationship Bree's father has with Alice and Alice's parents, and like, you know what I mean? And there's just this like kind of ripple effect that like then makes you think about Faye's loss of her mother, and then Faye's mother's loss of her, and tears.
Yeah, I took Alice's tears also to be like, she's very empathetic to Bree, and so like seeing Bree get reunited with her mother and knowing what has happened to Bree since her mother's passing is like, I'm sure that like hit her heart a certain way to be like in the stands seeing Bree be able to run up and hug her mother after all that's happened, and that just immediately bring a rush of tears. When Bree asked her mother like Bree's on a mission, right? Bree's here to like call upon these ancestors to get an understanding about how she can use their root in a like combat situation or defensively. So that's the first thing she is, able to ask her mom is like if she's ever called on their family root of her own volition, and her mother answers no. Bree's disappointed, but her mother reassures her that no one can tell her how to live life. They can just show how they live their life. And that's kind of like the overarching lesson that y'all were talking about earlier that she's supposed to take away from here. And her mom kind of sets her up to take, but Bree is not in the mindset to take that in right now. I don't know that she ever was prior to this either. I don't think she's gotten there. I think this is her moment of having to actually go through it.
Yeah. I mean, she comes in looking
Bree's
for concrete answers as opposed to like hearing experiences and taking what she can from those experiences.
And I think that's interesting. It's interesting because she's a medium, and all of her interactions so far with her ancestors would lend her, like, you would think that would be the summary that she would get. Like, even whenever she first went on the memory walk with Dr. Hartwood, like, you would think that's what she was supposed to get out of it. But it's interesting that I don't know. It's like in a world of like, I guess like the Order where like they have like weaponry and like they have a skill set or whatever, she's assuming that something similar can happen for her on her mother's side, but I don't know where that comes from besides like a comparison to the Order.
I think it also reinforces the fact that she's 16. Like, she still has the sense that like her mother and like the ancestors and stuff can fix everything, and they know everything. You know what I mean? And we talked a little bit about like grappling with the fact that your mother, your parents are human, and they make mistakes, and they decide things based on their own experiences and trauma, and like when that really settles into you, where you stop having those expectations of like perfection, or maybe not even perfection, but just like with like unflappable wisdom or something, like they know the answer, right? Like, and there are moments where that happens and you'll be like, oh, my parent doesn't know everything, and oh, whatever. But then there's also like, I think that is actually the one of the hallmarks of adulthood is when that like, it's not just a moment of like realization of that, but it really settles into you, and you really start to see your parents and your like adult figures in your life as like humans and flawed human beings, and accept that fully. And it's not a shock to you anymore, right? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, like you stumble here, I stumble there, like whatever, that's a human experience. And I think that Bree is not actually there yet. She hasn't internalized that yet, and the grief of losing her and like going back to like mommy, like she's in the headspace of like, mommy knows, mommy will fix it, mommy's here now. Like, mommy will fix it. Kiss me and tell me everything is gonna be okay, and that be that. And I think that it's a little bit of a regression caused or informed by the grief and the like getting back to her.
Yeah. And Bree's mom warns against that. She also warns against Bree trying to stop death for the wrong reasons, especially grief, which reminds Bree of Arthur, who is the exploiter of her grief. So I feel like her mom was trying to be like, listens, and she's like, oh, grief. And we're not in a place where she's like picking up on the lessons yet. It's like,
right, because she thinks of Arthur like literally the whole reason this whole spell of eternity exists is because Arthur was like, no more deaths. And it's like, what she ends up saying to Vera towards the end, like, it also applies to Arthur in a, I would say, I would in a on a larger scale, I think.
Miss Face also confirms that it's so Bree asked, the second question that Bree asked is, was Natasha Kane the one who helped her? Miss Faye confirms yes. And she even looks out into the crowd and looks at Cell as she's saying it. But whenever it comes to like her location, she's like, I don't know how to tell you nothing about that. Even if I saw her walking down the street, I couldn't tell you anything about it. She won't let me know. I don't got nothing for you over here. And she does leave Bree with like, like she loves Bree, and then to tell her father that she loves him too. Which I don't does her father even know she's a medium who can?
No, she knows nothing. He knows nothing.
So
it's just got to be one of those, dad, mom loves you, dad, like, it's got to be one of those like hypothetical situations.
But at the same way, it's kind of like, why? But like, wouldn't he be like, if her mother is saying that, perhaps that is a sign that her father would be okay with knowing about her root crafting. Like, she could like dial him in, like, hey, Dr. Hartwood is a root crafter, like my mom and her family line was, and so I've been getting in touch with root crafting through my therapy, and I found out that I'm a medium. Surprise! I spoke to mom. She says, "Love you lots." Like, is that?
I still think that's gotta wait until the end when she can be like, okay, dad, here's actually what happened in early college, but it can't happen right now.
Yeah.
And it's also not a phone conversation.
No.
Yeah.
So definitely not. Definitely, it's not even a Waffle House conversation either. Like, you need to be sitting down somewhere a little bit isolated. Like, yeah. Next up is her grandma, Leanne Charles, who, as soon as she pops out of there, she's like, you look a little skinny in the face. Have you been eating?
I love grandma.
I love how she like channels grandma energy, and she never actually was like alive to be a grandma.
Met her.
A grandma.
Yeah.
We were talking about this in the Discord because Connie was visiting her niece and like recognizing grandma energy, and then my mother and her abundance of grandma energy, and how it's just like a thing that like I think even in death, Miss Charles is like, it's my time.
Yeah,
let me
spoil my baby. I don't
like
care.
there's like it's in the epigenetics, maybe. I don't know.
No, I don't think that's how that works.
I think that's how it works.
Funny. But it's like you're trying to have a callback situation. I'm like, no, no. I think it'd be so funny if Bree was like a baby, and like her grandma was like, somebody put some sauce on my baby's feet. Like, it feels like the equivalent. Like, why are you over here looking thin? I don't like get it.
That's her grandbaby. She gonna make sure she's got the world, even though she is on the run from demons. Like, grandma, please focus.
I mean, her grandma's picking up on something though, because homegirl just was sliced open. Like, she's probably like looking thin from like loss of blood. Like,
come on,
she's got a right to be concerned about her. So grandma apologizes to Bree that she never used her root at all. And the lesson that she learned was that even though she never used her root, it ultimately didn't matter because Bree's mom still went the way she went.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jessie,
and it's also,
who we are familiar with, pops up.
I will say too, though, like it also, I was thinking about, like, as we go back, it's Tracy. So it's like so clear the like trauma that all of these like women have gone through, and it makes so much sense why Bree came into this with no knowledge. Like, because even like her grandmother it's not like she like Faye knew enough about what it was, but like it's like this trauma from losing my mom, so the way that I'm passing this down to you is not giving you all the information. I don't know anything about it because I'm not using it. And then like my mom before her, she ran into this hunter, so she was definitely, you know what I mean, like they just, as time goes on, like they just give less and less information out of fear. And it's just like it makes sense that Bree gets to where she gets at the end, but it's like it's wild to just like watch it happen in real time.
Watch what happens live, Robyn. Okay. So Jessie pops up and immediately looks to where her daughter once was. So this is where a question came up to me that y'all mentioned earlier. So she's aware of where her daughter was, but she looks at her like in that area like sadly because it's like she was not able to communicate with her daughter while she knows that her daughter was just there. So does that mean they're not able to communicate to each other while they're in the ancestral realm? Like
I don't think so. I think they need a medium.
Yeah.
I think maybe they can communicate with the other ancestors or spirits that were with them contemporarily that they knew. Like if me and you, if the three of us cross over to the ancestral plane, I could probably commune with you three, but I couldn't commune with like my great grandmother who I did not know.
But like she can't talk to her own daughter, and she birthed her daughter.
Right.
She raised her daughter.
I think that they just exist solitarily.
I don't like it for them. I feel like I really hate that for them, actually. Like they're not able to be in communion with each other. Like that's, you would hope that once they cross over, that's at least the least kind of rest they're able to get with each other.
I'm assuming that they're at rest and then they're called, and it's like what Arthur said before Bree. He doesn't know, like when he's awakened before, he's not able to like communicate with his scion. He's just kind of there and aware, but there's no interaction. And I'm assuming it's the same thing where they're just kind of like reliving their memories, or they're just they just cease to kind of be like the energy and the spirit is there, but it's not engaging in the same way. They're just like at rest until someone like Bree or a medium calls them, and then they're only really able to like speak on what they experienced while they were alive, because they're not experiencing things.
They're not omnipresent.
Yeah, and they're not and they're not experiencing things post death. They're not experiencing new things behind the veil.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
So Jessie, who we've seen her memory with the hunter, she is like, again, I'm going to warn you against luring the hunter to you by using your powers. Especially do not do that in a way that my mother did. She was trying to be a hero, and you're going to lure him to you. So then we next get her mother, Emmeline, popping up, and she admits, like, yeah, I was trying to be a hero. I did know how to use the power, but I'm not going to tell you because you're going to lure him. I was taken out by demon foxes, and as I lay dying, my light sputtering out, the hunter just watched over me as I did it. And Bree initially is energized by like Emmeline describing the kind of way that she was able to like wield her power in a whip-like kind of magic. But like when Emmeline is like, I'm not gonna tell you, girl, you gonna lure I already learned that lesson. And it was really traumatic. She also does not know when Bree asks her about like the blood mark and whether the hunter is the one who gave it to them. She's like, I don't know nothing about that word. No, blood marked. I don't know that. I don't know that term. But I can describe to you what the hunter looked like. He had black eyes with red irises, and she basically tells Bree, stay woke. And Bree responds in thought, I'm done running, girl. Like her, and she's like, I'm not gonna run away from nothing.
I have two thoughts. One, fuck Erebus, because what do you mean like you just sat there and watched her die? Be so serious. Two, I'm like, and maybe like, because I remember it feeling like, I feel like Bree was like multiple voices that were like in her head saying like, we ran so you didn't have to, and like you're our pain wielded blade, and whoop de whoop de whoop, we forged so that you could fight. And now every single one of them are like, no, Run, girl, run. So then it makes me think like Vera maybe made it seem like everybody was like, yeah, go ahead, but the rest of them were like, no, we want her to live. We do not want her to fight. And so it's like wild that then it's like kind of manipulating Bree into like, one, obviously she was like, she definitely wanted to fight, but I think that she's also moving this way because she's like, that's what my ancestors made me for, that, or you know what I mean, like that's why they have me here, and so that's what I'm gonna do. It like it kind of reinforces what she wants to do. But then she's
Bree's
actually
over
talking
here.
to them individually, and they're all like, can't help you.
What?
I'm not, even though I can help you, I'm
Bree-
not telling you. It's just like not, it's weird to read. And excuse me, and not weird in like a bad way, but just like I can feel Bree's kind of like confusion and like growing anger as it happens, because she's like, isn't that the reason I'm here? Like, isn't that what y'all told me to do? So
Yeah, I was taken aback by that, and I feel like Bree was so like energized by that sentiment that her head was like, she came into this with some like nug of you buck, I ain't never scared kind of like energy, like it was expecting for them to like be singing that chorus with her, and instead, and by singing the chorus, it's like, teach me your ways and say like, you're the one who like knows how to like use the power for a battle, like show me the way. And then the first one who has an idea of how to use it is like, nah, it's like, oh, I know,
It's not worth it, girl.
but I'm not gonna tell you.
It's not.
The demon foxes took me out.
I think it's like, I also really wish that Bree would have been like, I've been mauled by a demon fox or two in my time.
I too.
Been there, done that. I too have been attacked by a demon fox. But I do also think that it's an interesting dynamic in which she, we've been saying, they can only tell her from their own experiences, and a lot of them have not experienced fighting. But they are still like ancestors, and she is 16, and I'm sure that to them she looks like someone to be protected, and they grew up being told to run. So like you said, like she's sitting here like, y'all didn't get the memo that you ran so I could stand and fight, but like it'd be really hard to be like, okay, well, this is what you need to do when you're, I feel like their protective instinct is also kicking in right now. Like she is their baby.
I feel like they were all taught, like you were saying, the way to protect is to not get into it, is to survive. Like the way to move in this, we know what we have in past, and the way to use it is to just to go for survival. And I think that for me, but it's probably to Emmeline, and Emmeline is the one that Jessie said she was trying to be a hero, and Emmeline cops to wanting to be the one to use it like a hero. So whenever you see someone, because I feel like that's something I really enjoy from like when I do come across these stories of like the chosen one, but like years, like decades later, once they've like, it's like they were the chosen one whenever they were a teenager, but now they're a grown adult, and they're like, yo, like if I run into a chosen one, I'm gonna tell them straight forward, like, look,
go call
it ain't worth all that. Like I'm telling you, firsthand experience. Do you see the way I'm walking? That's throughout my vertebrae. Don't even play with it. Just walk the other way. You see how you given two options in your prophecy? Go with the other one. Don't even play with it. And I feel like this is what Emmeline's energy is. And Emmeline, like I said, is the first one who was like, oh, I know how to use the power defensively. And Bree's like, word? And she's like, I'm not gonna tell you though. Which is like, that's really mean. Like that is some like that I could see that being like an older sibling kind of energy where you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I'm not gonna tell you though. This is what you must learn today. Like, wow.
But that's where I'm saying, like, they're looking at her like, I'm not telling you, a child, how to go run into a burning building. Like, no. Absolutely not.
You say you wanna,
And
you wanna.
she has such main character energy. You're like, this girl gonna
I don't
really,
trust her.
she gonna kill herself. No, I'm not helping you.
I may not be omnipresent, but I can sense with the energy you're putting down.
The recklessness
Nope.
is loud.
And I think the other thing for me with Emmeline, I just enjoyed. I just feel like there's a lot here with Emmeline. I'll get back into it. But at this point, I wanted to name that Bree. I have admiration for like Bree's ability to like not everyone gets the ability to know their maternal line and be able to name them one after the other, especially in the Black community. It's like so rare. And then also it's just that like she has a presence of mind to do that after her mother, interaction. So I just want to name the women and how she was. So we've gone to Faye, to Leanne, to Jessie, to Emmeline, and we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more women to go through. Yeah. And Bree is on top of it. And after getting these really disappointing interactions from them, right? After a very refilled one into disappointment. And so next one up is Corinne, who died giving birth to Emmeline, and laments that not only was she not able to use her power, she wasn't able to help her baby come to understand what their family carried. And this also gives me a bit of insight into why Emmeline was pressed about being a hero, because she's probably thinking like, oh, if my mom is gone,
I was the chosen one. Yeah.
I'm the one who has to take up. I got to be able to use this in a way to save others, because I wasn't able to save my mom. So I'm going to have to try to save somebody. I have to save
also, she probably wasn't taught that like this comes in a form of protection. And a like a warning system. She's probably thinking, "Oh, I'm the chosen one."
Yeah, and she's
I got powers,
and
like
who knows what her relationship was with like the rest of the root community. So they probably like if she actually was in tune with other people who were like, "Hey, girl, you might have a target on your back if you let that loose." Like she probably didn't know, and so whenever she gets like it doesn't sound like she had any backup when she was surrounded by the demon foxes. So she's sitting out here running into Shadowborn, thinking she can take them on as she goes because she's the chosen one, and she gets got with the freaking hunter / Erebus just as an audience member to her murder.
I'm now thinking about the fact that like she was definitely looking at Bree like, you the type of girl that's gonna knock on the lodge and be like, easy peasy. And I'm not. I was that girl. And as someone who was that girl, I'm not helping you, because the inevitable conclusion to easy peasy is your ass laid out, killed by some hell foxes with the hunter standing over you, being like, needs a little bit more salt.
Like you say easy peasy, and the Shadowborn say indeed and did. They do Cardi B, they're like and did. Sure is. I know that's right. Easy peasy. So next one up is is Corinne's mother, Regina, and she is the first one that we know from the line who's like the most recent. Like from this point onwards, these are all women who lived pre-emancipation. So when she takes in her surroundings, she's like, "Is this ours?" And they Lou and Hazel like. Lou responds, "Yes, ma'am." And so she nods with like acceptance and like word, like, okay, I feel that, because she can take in that this place is a former plantation, but she can feel the energy of it being reclaimed. And I love that Dr. Kishana gave us a term for it, like in the baddie chat, remediation, for like the land be remediated to the folks. And that Regina, she was never one of the ancestors at this particular plantation, but she feels the vibes, and like she's good with it. So while we get that like moment of warmth and kind of like a little bit of healing, her actual interaction with Bree is like, yeah, I did use my power. It came when I called it, but I'm not telling you because the hunter will find you just like he found Arlan before. So that's two different people in Bree's family line being like, I can confirm. And well, three, because technically Jessie did use it, and she saw Jessie's memory of using it and being like, nah, never again.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's hearing from two other women that they know how to use it, know how to call it, and it came at their command. But they are too scared of the hunter to allow Bree to take it on.
There is a thing here, and I just think we have to name it, of infantilization. I don't think that it doesn't, like, it does make sense why. I'm not saying, like, she's 16. You're looking at your own experiences, like we just said. It makes sense why their instinct is like, no, I'm not telling you this for your own good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also this, like, infantilization and, like, the sense of taking away Bree's agency in a way that, like, is extra hurtful / harmful, because they're not the idea of, like, one daughter at a time. Like, you're not going to be there when she does reach the age or whatever that you deem she's ready to know these things, right? Like,
I don't think they ever see a day where she's ready. I think that
I don't think
she'll never they'll never want her to interact with the hunter, so they'll never tell her anything.
Right. And
but I also
get
think
that, but I'm like, at what
yeah.
point? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I think it's less to me like age and more that I think, and I don't know that maybe Bree isn't giving enough context, but they don't understand that she's being hunted already. So it's not that, like, it's not, oh, she's not in danger and the hunter could come after her. It's like she already has, even if it's not the hunter, she has people coming after her. So she needs to learn how to use this thing. That's why she doesn't want to just fight arbitrarily. She's not searching for hell foxes, even though she did suggest it. She's not searching for them to, like, fight. She's literally...
Imagine Emmeline overhearing Bree say that. Like, imagine Emmeline.
No, she'd be like, girl, please. But it's like,
Please.
but I'm just like, in this situation, it's like, they're already coming for me. It's not a if or a, oh, I need to hide. It's like, they're literally already doing that. So, in this way, it's like they're trying to save her, but they're actually not. They're actually doing the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's my point too, is like, you, under the guise of trying, or like, you know best or whatever, you're actually continuing to put her in harm's way. And it's something that we talked a lot about with, like, Bree's mom, of like, if you know that you're not going to be, or at some point abatement is coming for you, and you're not going to be there, you don't know exactly when, but you know that at some point you're going to die before you're going to die earlier than the average mother-daughter relationship. Like, why not equip her with enough information as possible, and then hope and trust that she will be mature enough to know when to run and when to stand and fight. And I think that is, like, where I'm at, like, the frustration that I think Bree gets to, or it's building up in Bree right now, but also with me, of, like, as someone who has been babied, of being like, okay, I understand the impulse to protect, but also, like, I'm asking you for this information, and at what point are we going to just have trust that I know what to do? And even if that's not your choice, or you wouldn't choose to, like, stand and fight or whatever, like, you trusted me enough to, like, you know, if you like it, I love it, basically. You know, that root looks good on you, you know, or whatever. It's just like, there needs to be, and I think that this is, like, a dynamic that just is a family dynamic, and dynamic that a lot of people have like experienced of that kind of like infantilization and not feeling like your caretakers and things are ever going to have confidence to let you kind of leave the nest, basically. And I think that, yes, she's very young, but at a certain point, like, they need to have some sort of like grappling with just like, okay, give her the information and the knowledge, and then let's trust in her to do the right thing.
I feel like, not to put this on Bree, and I hate whenever adults do this, so I'm trying to like contextualize it because this is very specific to like roots and invoking ancestors. And it's more on her mother and grandmother, honestly, than it is on Bree. But Bree, for a lot of them, it's their first time ever talking to them. So they're not omnipresent or omniscient.
Right.
So how would they know what the girl's gone through and what she's currently under?
Exactly.
They're just getting her popping up and asking her the next question.
Yeah.
So what Bree and hopefully the root crafters will like help Bree on this journey in further books. They're showing her
give more context.
that you have to build a relationship with the ancestors. Like when Mariah's putting out the foods and whatever, like you have to build a relationship with the ancestors in order for them to be able to come to you whenever you call upon them with information that is useful to you. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like she hasn't built a relationship with
it
these
is on both sides for sure.
It's both, for sure.
And it's not, you know, how would she have the knowledge of how to evoke the ancestors on a regular basis and commune with them? She wouldn't have that because her mother and her grandmother, like, they didn't build that kind of relationship with other root crafters to know that's how they like typically do that. So hopefully this is a learning moment for her. And also in that, like, it's also a learning moment that she's learning the names of the ancestors who are battle ready. So she knows exactly which ones she needs to build that relationship with in order to like gain the knowledge that they have.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it is like, and Bayana said it too, like there's a context that Bree is not giving them, and there is this relationship that needs to be built. So like I said, I do very much understand the impulses of not wanting to give her that information, but yeah, hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully we'll get there in Oathbound.
Yeah.
We're not getting there today.
Hopefully soon. She'll be like, hopefully she's like, you know what? One thing I did remember from Volition is that like I need to give my ancestors whatever. But at the same time, we know she's not starting off in a good place. She's not starting in a place.
She's not starting in a good place
to do what she also needs to do.
Yeah. And again, and I think again too, like I mostly already said this, but it's the humanization of ancestors too, right? It's like they have their flaws, and so this situation or this interaction is not like, yes, there's a level of reverence and like relationship building and community building that you have to do with them in order to like get what you want out of like your interaction or whatever, but like I think Bree she hasn't yet internalized and will not by the end of this chapter, but that like it's not a matter of going to this. It's not like you're going to the library and you're just like pulling things off the shelf to
They are not Google.
They're not Google.
Right.
They're like, this is a interaction that you're having with another human being that has their own like different, they have their own experiences and biases and perspectives and all of that stuff, and all of these things affect you and how you've been raised. And so that's like, there's like a level of baggage that comes with it, even if it is someone who's like 4 generations away. But you have to come to it not thinking that they are like just some, like we said, omnipresent, omniscient being. Like they're human beings and they're coming with that information. They can help you, but there's a relationship there that has to be built.
It is literally intergenerational trauma kind of personified or like laid bare in one moment. And she, again, is under threat now, and it's like she doesn't feel as though she has the space or the time for those nuances. Like, she's working off a place of urgency, even though like 2 seconds ago she was like, isn't it nice that we can just like sleep and rest without worrying about being under siege and like going from trauma to trauma? You're now in the spot and in the place where you need to take that time, build these relationships and bonds, but you know, we're not
Instead,
there.
she's hearing about trauma after trauma and she's being upset. I just had a moment of like catching the fact that like technically like in this series probably like a separate an alternate universe away from like the what happened in 2020 and like the shutdowns and like high school and everything being like virtual and all that kind of stuff. But technically Bree is one of those kids whose life got altered by like Zoom and everything. And because she never really had extended family, she's never really built that socializing with older family members muscle. And so that explains her like popping out, wanting to pop off kind of thing, and like not having built that up to be like, you know what, I know how to interact with these folks when they talk a kind of way kind of thing. But also it also is like a showcase into how she kind of like is why she would expect, oh, I can go into a social interaction in this way and get like answers. I'm used to socializing through the internet and getting answers through the internet and like working in that way. And it's so funny being my age, not around children, and hearing like the folks who are like older than me who do have kids talk about like their like perception of like how that time period where the kids were cut off from being social and like in person to person has affected their ability to actually be social now that they have the ability to be social person to person, and how it's like harder for them to figure it out, and like they don't have the same kind of interaction kind of ways that other people have had in previous generations without social media, without the shutdown and everything having like shut off that like ability to be social. And it's funny that even without that being part of Bree's story, it's still kind of showing up in Bree's story. So not to be like the use, but also the use of it all. So the next one up, her name is Mary, and she says that the demons were everywhere within her time period, along with other monsters. And once she saw the hunter, she made sure he had never had a reason to find her again. She said, "You gotta tell me twice. That's you. You ain't got. That's it for me." And so she never called on her powers again because she was like, one glimpse of the hunter is enough for me. I'm good. So apparently, but we don't see. I feel like Regina and Emmeline both sound like they kind of use their powers defensively. Mary, I'm not sure, because even though she's saying there's monsters and demons everywhere, it doesn't sound like she's like saying that she had interactions with them. She's just like aware of them. So she might have used it more protection wise. It sounds like to me. So I'm in my list of ancestors for Bree to call upon. I think I would put her in a different place than I would put her like Regina and Emmeline. And then we have Sella, who is Vera's daughter. She says she's never used her powers, and she warns Bree that she should get like the rest of the maternal line and just move with the air of trying to survive. And like Bayana said earlier, this is what a point where in my notes I was like, I get they were looking to protect her, but like, weren't they the ones who called her weapon turned wound? And was it only Vera? Because why else is everyone just not on the same agenda as what Vera said? And I'm like, and it was like, I thought like a similar, I thought it was all of them. I felt like it was multiple voices. So but at this point, after talking to Sella, Bree's in the same place. We're all like confused, like, Mr. Krabs, what's going on? I'm the weapon turned wound, right? And so she's very angry at Vera for telling her that, but then not allowing for everyone to be able to show her what needs to be done. And I wanted to give a moment to the fact that like I understand Bree's frustration, but I also understand having been in a place, because I'm not throwing away wisdom to the children, the young folks. I don't know them like that. I don't have them in my life like that to be giving the young folks wisdom. But I do understand the fact of like being younger and someone can say something to you till they're blue in the face. If you don't vibe with what they're talking about, you're gonna do whatever you want to do anyway. And I can like see the ancestors being like, I'm not even gonna give you anything for you to take any kind of way. I'm gonna be very specific. Because they have known, one, what it's like to be the young person, but also like how hard it is to guide and shape a young person. And like how they move, because you can tell them something and it just not be received in a way that you intended for it to be received. So I'm like, I understand Bree's anger, but I also understand why the ancestors are like, we're not having any kind of interaction where I can just like guide you with my knowledge in a way that I think would actually help you to survive right now.
I also wonder too, like thinking about the wound turned weapon and who Bree is facing. Again, this goes into context and how Bree's asking and framing the question, and that they don't truly understand who she's facing. Like, they're thinking about her going up against the hunter, and they're like, just don't. How about no? Right? And I think that there's also a sense of Bree assuming, or assumptions on both sides, where it's like, I'm not going up again. I'm not trying to track down the hunter and go up against him. I'm not trying to track down demons really and go up against them. I'm going up against the order. I'm going up against like this system who already know who I am. They found me. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? It's not like I can't just slink away and hide or like not bring attention to myself, right? They know who I am. They know they're looking for me now, right? And it's like what you guys talked about with her not explaining really that she needs to learn this not because she's going out hunting, but because she's being hunted. But also who is hunting her. And it's not that like the hunter isn't a threat and someone that she needs to be aware of. It's that he's not the only one now. And it's not like don't bring attention to yourself because then he's showing up. It's like there's already people know me and they're coming after me, and so he's going to show up regardless because I'm not the one bringing the attention to myself. And and that's a problem of just like communication and like and giving context and that kind of stuff too, because yeah, they're not omnipresent. They don't know what she's up against currently.
So Vera gets there, and immediately Bree reads Vera for setting her up with the whole line about wound turn weapon, and the fact that Vera effectively cursed their line without actually having to face the curse herself. And Vera's like, oh, you hold your britches, little lady. You ain't never had to go through the pain I went through. And Bree's like, valid. I didn't, and I understand that, and I'm gonna let you have that. However, you owe it to me and the family to make sure I know how to use my power to keep this line alive, because your bargain is the one who got us here and cursed us so that I'm the one standing here at the end of the line. Vera throws back, baby, that's not how that works. I did what I needed to do. And it's up to you to keep the line alive. It's your judgment. You make the call, you make the decision. And then she leaves. And Bree angrily goes to the ground, trying to summon Vera back, throwing all kinds of energy and aether into it. And she gets so pent up and so fired with the anger, even after Lou tells her to calm the F down, that she cuts a hole, not in just the circle that she's in, but within the Volition's own barrier of protection that's surrounding the whole entire space, the property.
Big yikes.
Almost like one would see in the like Infinity War, where like they were just like effing with the Black Panther barrier, and then suddenly like Bree's just like, well,
Pew.
let me just
Pew.
do that myself. It's a hole. It's not the whole thing, but it's a hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That did not go well.
Don't you hate self-fulfilling prophecies? Like, all her ancestors like, you're gonna bring attention on yourself, you're gonna bring attention upon yourself, you're gonna bring attention upon yourself, and Bree's like, don't tell me that! Here we go.
But it's also like, if you were to tell her how to control it, then she probably would be less likely to do that.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's like she's the whole she has the power. The power's there. It's awakened. It's there. Done. So
can't put the cat back in the bag now.
Nope. Mm-mm. You're muted, Robyn.
Because my freaking AirPods died and I've been switching back and forth. It's also weird because it's like, what is the point? And this is like where we get to who I binge. What is the point of asking for the power, bringing the power, if you're just going to run and not use it? Mm-hmm. And I know that Vera doesn't, because Vera's like, Hunter who? What are you talking about? Like, that ain't got nothing to do with me. Right? So she doesn't, again, like we said before, like she doesn't know that she made this deal with a demon, and he piggybacked off of the deal that she was making with her ancestors. But I have to believe that, like, she makes this deal and then she has to use this power as like, she still has the baby and lives for a certain amount of time, like, with the order, like, you know, looking for her and her child. So, like, she's had to fight. Vera herself has had to fight. So, like, why isn't Vera at least telling her something? Like,
Vera's the main one. Like, you got she's hyping her up and then don't have nothing to tell her.
And it's like, well, what was the point of asking for the power then? Which is why Bree's frustrated.
Because it's for the order. I feel like if Bree gets up to her with the order, then maybe Vera would have been like, oh, shoot. Them Davises coming after you. Let me tell you a little bit something about them Davises. That'd have been a whole different kind of conversation. She's over here like, I need power now. And F you. You messed up the whole family line. Now I'm standing here. I don't know what to do. And then I tell him. And she's like, what? She's like,
A lot of that is like you go and respect your elders.
Mm-hmm.
Type of, I really do think that,
and the defensiveness too, of like not being able to, not wanting to accept. She's like, I saved y'all. I did what I had to do to save
I did what I had to do.
And she's like, but you at the same time you didn't, because you're saving us also put a dang cap on our lives, on our relationship with our mothers, on like and it's kind of like what goes back to what Lucille was talking about when she first found out that Bree was a blood crafter and like her family was, or she was like, oh, is it worth it? And it was like a shady and like, you know, judgmental question, but this is also a moment where Bree is like, dude, I don't know if this was worth it for you to do that. Like, you saved us, but did you really? You know what I mean?
Save how? Oh. Like, I'm
but it's also like
power,
it's an, like, there's an ego here, and I'll get into it a little bit more, of just like not being able to, you did what you needed to do at the time, but now you need to stop and think about like the unintended consequences of those actions, and then try to come to a place in which you can hold both things. Mm-hmm. And Bree's not going to be the wound turned weapon until everyone in the line can hold both of those things. Like, we did what we needed to do to survive, but there are unintended consequences, and we need to reckon with what that means and how we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know, I'm thinking it. I don't know if Bree's thinking it, but like, at what point do we try to figure out how to get out of this? It made sense at the time for Vera. It made sense. Does this bargain make sense now with where Bree is and where we want to go moving forward? Sometimes it's like we just do it because that's the way it's been done. But at what point are you like, well, does it need to be done that way anymore? So, whew. Whew.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, who is your MVP?
I gave it to Volition as a whole. I just think that the way in which, and I know that's not a quantifiable thing, but the way in which this place has been lovingly and like very thoughtfully established, and allows for something like this to happen in a place of like safety and contentment, is really amazing. And then just the things that we learn in these 3 chapters about how Volition works, both with the ancestors and the root work, but then also with the people who are there on the land, with like Lucille and Mariah, and like, if you're going to be here, you're going to be useful, and we're going to have like dinners in which everyone contributes to the dinner, and we're going, you know, like the whole vibe of the place and the aura of like what's going on and what they're building there.
Similarly, I gave it to ancestors, which I meant like the Volition ancestors. I feel like the way that works, the way that they dictate taking ownership and power over the land in a way that is like restorative to them, as they are at rest. So much so that even whenever you call upon ancestors who were not from that place, they are recognizing that energy, and they're able to be like, oh wow, like this is possible. Like that was very warm for me. And then also I wanted to give it to Miss Faye, Bree's mother, who immediately, like, who could have been like, you know, puzzled or confused, or like responded to her daughter in a way that was like, you know, like concern, that's kind of like an anger concern that sometimes happens, like whenever you're so concerned about someone, it just it comes out like aggressively. She actually kind of like, she handled that like I would hope any interaction that we first get with Bree's mom would go. And I really appreciated that she gave Bree the like time she needed and like the embrace she needed, as well as like answered, you know, questions that are related to Sel's mom, in a way that like I think she got the most time on page of the ancestors besides Farah.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated that we got to have that with her.
I made Lucille and Hazel my MVPs just for like being the stewards of this like process for them, and for Bree like specifically. Yeah, that was my main. That was mine. Who did you bench?
I'm the only one that deviated a little bit, so I'm just gonna go with it. And maybe this is my own
No,
trauma.
I think it's fine.
I'm gonna say this comes from a place of relating a little bit too closely to Bree, but I had to bench Vera, and I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of generational and intergenerational trauma that is beyond the control of anyone, especially in Black families where, you know, you're up against enslavement and then institutionalized racism and then racial violence and like all of these things that have nothing to do with the people in your family. and is being pushed upon you from the outside and has nothing, like, is out of your control. And then there are the ways in which people deal with that trauma and how that leads to more trauma. And while it is understandable, it still happens, and you have to, at a certain point, like, let your ego go, or just be honest, and like, and let your defenses down and say, like, yeah, I did a lot of these things for survival, but the way in which I did these things had unintended consequence. I wasn't intending, right? But it's like impact over intent, right? I wasn't intending to, like, pass along this, like, grief of daughter losing mother. Like, that was not in my brain when I made that bargain to have this power. I understood the words, but I didn't think through what that meant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just was thinking very much in the moment of what I needed to do at this moment. And so for Vera to just be so defensive with Bree, again, we were kind of talking about, like, how the ancestor, like, work, in that they're not, my understanding is that, like, if they're not called on by a medium, they're not existing on the, like, ancestral plane the way that you think about with, like, Black Panther, right? They're not sitting there enjoying each other's company and living in paradise. So I don't expect that she's had the time to reckon with and, like, really think things through. But when when Bree confronts her with this, if she would have responded without being so defensive and just, like, took it and, like, held that and been like, you know what? Maybe, like, maybe I'm not ready to apologize for it right now, but, like, okay, I hear you. Like, that could have gone such a long way and, like, really started, like, a healing process. And I think at a certain point, you have to be like, okay, trauma is inevitable to a certain extent, especially given our family makeup and what we're fighting against externally. But internally, there has to be something I can do to start to, like, heal from certain things and to change trajectories moving forward. And I just think that Vera was not able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of funny, kind of symmetry, that Vera reacts the same way Bree would if someone came up to her, the way that Bree came to her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's the other thing about, like, her interacting with her ancestors. Like, they're all mirrors of her. Like, you can find something in them, in her, in every interaction that they have, and it's like, yeah, y'all are family. Like, and y'all are dealing with, it's compounded trauma, right? It's been 8 generations, so stuff that, like, Selah had to deal with, Emmeline, you know what I mean? And it's more stuff, but yeah. I binged Erebus, aka the Hunter, because he, like, this whole time he's a freaking stalker. He's he's a moocher, and he's just, like, stalking and, like, hovering over them this whole time. It's like, yeah, Vera ran away from these, like, monsters, right? Who, like, raped and now are threatening, or now trying to murder her and, like, and her child. And so she literally is trying to, like, gather power and a way to protect herself. And here's comes Erebus over here, like, oh, I'm just gonna let me get in on that. And so you're just adding more trauma, and, like, there's, like, this sense of ownership that he has over them and their magic and their power. And so, yeah, it's like, he literally just, he's the specter, like, he's a fucking ghost around their whole thing, right? It's not the start of the trauma, but he just adds to it as time goes on. And, like, it, now, I mean, he's already stalking Bree, but, like, it's a big part of the reason why nobody will tell her anything.
Yeah, I also benched Erebus for all the reasons, but also pre-benching. Like, it's like in my brain, it's like like F you for setting up of reasons why Bree cannot get in touch with her ancestors, because you're literally the boogeyman they were all running from.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have Bree's, like, you know, spoilers, whenever he takes Bree with him, like, how is she gonna be able to call on her ancestors about this freaking a-hole with her? Like, there's no way. She's gonna have to figure out and so that cuts off her stream of ability to be able to get in contact with them. It cuts off their ability to get a better understanding of like what all that survival actually means for the latest survivor of their family line, and like how they could help and aid in her survival in a very like straightforward way. Especially when we like in this chapter we're getting, well, in this episode we're getting so many cool moments of Bree being in a place where she's not only seeing like how others have been able to commune with ancestors, but she's even like tapping into it herself with like noting that they're setting up dinner not with ancestors but in the same space the ancestors occupied, and in a similar way that they did so, like snapping green beans is the same way that people have been snapping green beans for generations. And she's just like adding upon that energy, but she can't pull on the same energy for her family because of this guy. So at Erebus, at his crew, at the day he was ever born, I hope he falls down a cliff and is smothered by rocks.
Was he born or did he just come into being?
However he was created, I hope that
take him back.
Just sucking it right out of the take him on out of here. I rue the day he was ever generated. F that man. Demon, whatever. Oh.
All right.
And with that, we would like to thank you all for listening. Join us next week when we discuss chapters 49 through 51.
We're like so close to the end.
Oh my god.
So also, don't forget to send us your MVPs and bench. There's a form. It's in the show notes. You just click it. You put what chapter it's for. You put your MVP and benched. If you want to add a reason, go ahead. If not, it's fine. You don't even have to put your name on it if you don't want your name on it. But we're getting really close to the end, so we would like to know your votes and your thoughts.
I would also like to hear any devious ways you have for Erebus to die. I want to hear all of them. Actually, add them to the our comment section on Instagram. I'll read them and I'll like them and I'll enjoy out and cackle at everyone. Please, just any deaths you want to throw at him. Basically, just think of the meme "die, just die," and just imagine Erebus being on the receiving end of that. Thank you.
What they said. Wizard Team is a part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you want to keep up with our content, you can check out our website at blacknerdscreate.com. Follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create. Bye.
Bye.
All right. What they said. Wizard Team is a part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you want to keep up with our content, you can check out our website at blacknerdscreate.com. Follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create. Bye!